From outside of Nigeria in a different time zone. Good morning to you, good evening, good day. Thank you very much for joining us. The annual Faith Foundation Policy Dialogue Series on Entrepreneurship is a platform that brings together key ecosystem players across public, private, and development sectors to discuss pertinent issues that impact on entrepreneurs directly, with the goal of influencing entrepreneurship policy review and implementation. This year, the focus of the conversations will be on the theme Building an Inclusive, Cohesive, and Sustainable Ecosystem. Conversations will revolve around enabling post-pandemic recovery for entrepreneurs, fostering innovation through technology, and entrepreneurship-led growth. We have a rich lineup of speakers who will be sharing insights and recommendations around these key thematic areas. This year, we're also excited to be launching our flagship State of Entrepreneurship in Nigeria report, and we will get to that very shortly. We're also happy to be hosting the Policy Dialogue Program this year as part of activities marking the Global Entrepreneurship Week. Before we proceed, a few housekeeping rules. Please use the question and answer box to share your questions. We have a team who would collect them and ensure they're addressed during the Q&A segment. You can also use the chat box to share your feedback, suggestions, and comments. I can see that some of you are already welcoming each other on the chat box. So let's keep that going. We are live on Twitter, so please join the conversation online using the hashtag FaithPDS. We will be taking the opening remarks very shortly, but before we do, I would like to acknowledge and thank two very important organizations who have made the development of the research report and the hosting of this year's Policy Dialogue Program possible. We would like to thank and appreciate Meta, formerly Facebook, and Banwo and Igodalo for graciously hosting us in this beautiful live studio. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome the Executive Secretary to the Ogun State Government, our Board Director and Chairman of the Communications and Advocacy Committee at Faith Foundation. The Communications and Advocacy Committee is the board committee that directly oversees our research and policy advocacy work at Faith Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Tokumbo Talabi to take the opening remarks. You're welcome, sir.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to formally welcome you to the 7th Annual Faith Foundation Policy Dialogue Series on Entrepreneurship. I acknowledge the presence of the founder and chairman of Faith Foundation, Mr. Fola Adeola, all our distinguished speakers for today, and more importantly, also our board members and also members of the committee. I also acknowledge and welcome all the virtual participants, both that are joining us locally and those that are joining us internationally. These people represent the stakeholders and segments of Nigerian entrepreneurship ecosystem. Please permit me to stand on all existing protocols as might have been established now or in the future. Before we proceed this morning, I would like to briefly share with you all our research and policy approach at Faith Foundation. Like Hamaka mentioned, the annual Faith Foundation Policy Dialogue Series on entrepreneurship brings together key players and stakeholders within the Nigerian entrepreneurship ecosystem to deliberate on issues for impacting entrepreneurs in Nigeria. Of course, today, everything that we do in our life is based on data. Strategic decisions are taken based on data. So we're using data and evidence-based information from Faith Foundation's annual research report. Our discussion takes a deep dive approach to arrive at key agreements that influence our entrepreneurship policy advocacy efforts, targeted at ensuring a productive and sustainable entrepreneurship ecosystem. Entrepreneurship has proven to be the most important driving force for socio-economic growth and development. The importance of an enabling environment to entrepreneurial ecosystems cannot be overemphasized. Now more than ever, the urgency for the adoption of sustainable entrepreneurship promotion measures takes a new significance, given the burgeoning youthful population of the country and the rising unemployment and underemployment levels that we have in our environment today. Our intent at our policy dialogue is to highlight the challenges, risks, and opportunities in the entrepreneur ecosystem, which allow stakeholders across private, public, and development sectors to understand our unique dynamics and strategize to effective policy and program strategies. Our annual policy dialogue and quarterly policy workshops are strongly influenced by our advocacy work. At the center of the dialogue and the conversations are research and data insights on Nigeria's micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, and the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Identifying a huge void in information and insight in this space, we launched our research and policy unit in 2015. Since then, we have developed 12 research reports exploring various themes, including the Nigerian MSME policy environment, mapping of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Nigeria's MSMEs. You can access these reports and more on the link being provided in the chat box. And for those who are listening, it is www.faithfoundation.org/research. These thought leadership insights form the context and guided all our annual policy dialogues over the last 6 years and led to the advocacy efforts we continue to do, working with a number of you present here today and also on platforms such as the MSME Community of Practice at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. In curating the 7th edition of our policy dialogue, we could not think of a more relevant topic than the theme, building an inclusive, cohesive, and sustainable ecosystem, especially considering the economic and the entrepreneurial challenges that have been exacerbated by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our theme, which aligns with this year's Global Entrepreneurship Week themes on inclusion, ecosystems, and policy, will be focused on how we can rebuild and reinvigorate our local and national economy through entrepreneurship. As with previous years, all our panelists cut across the different entrepreneurship ecosystem segments, including policy and regulation, business support, access to funding, and media. They all will bring unique perspective to today's conversations. I am personally looking forward to learning from their insights and experiences. As our research and policy work has evolved over the years, we have seen the need to also institutionalize and prepare the foundation to adapt to the needs and the requirements of our burgeoning entrepreneurship environment. In this regard, at our 58th Board of Directors meeting earlier this year, the Board of Faith Foundation approved the establishment of the Faith Institute to effectively build on our traction to date and further enhance our objective of enabling problem-solving strategies to foster sustainable entrepreneurship in Nigeria. As part of its program, the Faith Institute will, 1, launch an annual entrepreneurship index showcasing insights, trends, changes, and opportunities of sustainable entrepreneurship in Nigeria. 2, establish an expert in residence research fellow program that showcase and supports those with fresh thinking and innovative approaches to entrepreneurship policy issues in Nigeria. 3, publish periodic entrepreneurship policy white papers, briefs, opinions, and opinion pieces. And 4, finally, deepen our convening impact through regular policy workshops and the annual policy dialogue to share and learn with other stakeholders in the space. As part of these objectives outlined, I am excited to announce that today we will be launching the 2021 State of Entrepreneurship in Nigeria, which will be the first of many annual editions to come. This report shows data around key entrepreneurship indicators, business performance, particularly looking at vulnerable groups like women and youth-led businesses, challenges and opportunities within the ecosystem, and also profiles recommendations. Adenike Adeyemi, our executive director, will be sharing insights shortly and the link for you to download it. I must commend the Faith Institute team for working hard to put together this report in time for the program today. As we continue with the program, I encourage you to engage, ask questions, and share your thoughts and ideas. Together, let's build an ecosystem that is inclusive, cohesive, and sustainable. Thank you, and do enjoy the conversations. God bless.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate the background you have just shared and provided on the work that we do at Faith Foundation with regards to research and policy advocacy. Like Mr. Talabi mentioned, we're going to be launching our flagship report on the state of entrepreneurship in Nigeria. But before we get to that, we're going to be launching a poll, and I hope that the team is ready. We want to get a sense of the people on the call. So kindly tell us and indicate what segment of the entrepreneurship ecosystem you operate in, or the segment that closely describes what you do. Can we have the poll up, please? Okay, thank you. While that is going on, I would like to acknowledge all our panel speakers who are here and present. And I'm just going to quickly run through and mention their names. I have Dr. Diko Umaru Rada, Director General, Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDAN. I have Tubosun Alake, Special Advisor to the Lagos State Government on Innovation and Technology. I have Carlos Ahumada, who is the Public Policy Manager, EMEA and LATAM, Data for Good at Meta. And we also have Yewande Adewusi, who is the Regional Director, Africa, BBC Global News. We have with us Stephen Naletambi, please excuse me, Director, Financial Sector Development Department, the African Development Bank, AFDB. And we have Tosin Faniro Dada, who is the Managing Director and CEO, Endeavor. We also have Yvonne Johnson, who is the co-founder in Decina. Like I mentioned, we have a rich lineup of speakers who will be sharing amazing insights and recommendations. So can we all take the poll, please? How many seconds do we have? Okay, so we can end the poll now. Thank you to everyone who participated. Moving on quickly, I am now going to invite the Executive Director, Faith Foundation, Adenike Adeyemi, to the stage to flag off and unveil the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amaka. Good morning, everyone, once again, and you're welcome to our 7th annual Policy Dialogue Series on Entrepreneurship. On behalf of the Board of Faith Foundation and the Faith Institute team, it is my delight to present to you our flagship report, which is the 2021 State of Entrepreneurship in Nigeria report. As Mr. Atalabi has said, this is an inaugural report which we intend to do every year, and we'll be launching to share and to show the state of entrepreneurship across different indicators that we've designed and we've developed taking into consideration the dynamics of our entrepreneurship ecosystem. You can download the report on this link, which would also be put in the chat box, www.faithfoundation.org/2021 SOE. And I also have a hard copy here too. I'm going to very briefly go through the major highlights of the report, the structure, what it contains, and more importantly, the insights that will be very important for all the key segments of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. In the poll that we recently launched, I can see that we have everybody from policy and regulation, enterprise training centers, incubators, accelerators, funding providers, access to market providers, research and development expertise, and business development support service providers who are here. So this really is a report for you and to enable the work that you've done. To provide the context for the insights that we have here and the data, we surveyed 7,106 respondents across 26 states across the country. We had to deploy over 170 enumerators to deploy this survey. 95% of our respondents were field respondents, and then we also had about 5% of the respondents online. We also interviewed over 10 organizations who were either business membership organizations, chambers of commerce and industries, enterprise development centers, who also had a large body of entrepreneurs and could also disseminate and provide us feedback in the certain perspectives that we're looking at. I would appreciate if you can show the presentation. Thank you. We looked at 5 entrepreneurship indicators, which I'll be going through shortly, explored the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, had a demographic lens, particularly with youth and women-led businesses, looked at the impact of technology, and also at the end of all of that, provided insights and perspectives on policy recommendations for all of us. With respect to the 5 indicators that we use, we have 5 indicators for us which we felt best expressed the indicators around entrepreneurship in Nigeria. The first was business performance, and essentially that looked at the share of people, the share of respondents who felt their businesses either grow or did not grow. So in terms of looking at business growth, true revenue growth, job creation, and all the other indicators around business performance that would normally look like in looking at the success of a business. We also looked at the perception of opportunities. We all understand that it's very important to also understand how people perceive growth opportunities or otherwise within the space. Explored the share of survey respondents who either felt that we're in an opportunistic entrepreneurship ecosystem or otherwise. Digital adoption and the role of technology was also a very strong component of the report. So we looked at how the entrepreneurs understood technology that were available from operations development to marketing to in their businesses. The fourth part of the entrepreneurs to even understand and build also getting skills and talent on their team. And the last business environment, the policy and regulatory environment that supported them
Your internet
different
is not
locations
stable.
in Nigeria.
Your internet is not stable. If you can maybe switch off your video and maybe you can get more traction. You're breaking a lot. Thank you.
What we also did, and which is very interesting, was we looked at the indicators from a variable of 1 and then did a standard deviation to find the perfect scores along the respondents and the feedback that we had. I will not go into the main details and the highlights, but In terms of the highest areas from the indices, skills and digital adoption really came out as the strongest highlight, where the lowest performing ones were around business performance and the enabling business environment. The other thing that was also interesting was looking at these indicators alongside the 26 states that we reviewed. So again, we had a composite index for all the states, summarizing in a weighted average all the indices for the 5 areas, but we also presented the indicators alongside the different 5 indicators. And as you can see, not just even on my presentation, but in the report itself, you'll be able to see how each of the 26 states that we reviewed performed in the areas of business performance, perception of opportunities, digital adoption, skills adoption, and enabling business environment. I would like to say that our goal for 2022 will be to ensure that we have the 36 states and the FCT indicators fully present, and then also looking at trends of how the 26 states that we explored this year are performing against the next year. So please be on the lookout for our 2022 report. The other thing that we looked at was the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the businesses. So businesses that failed, businesses that started, and also how businesses fared in terms of revenue growth and job growth. In terms of the demographics, we looked at female-led businesses and youth-led businesses. For us, particularly in the conversations that we're having today around ensuring an inclusive and sustainable ecosystem, we can't have an inclusive system without looking at how women-led businesses in Nigeria are faring across all segments, and how young people who make up majority of the population, and particularly in times when we have double-digit unemployment and underemployment rate, significant underemployment and unemployment rate, we have to look at how they're faring in terms of enabling young people to start, grow, and scale their businesses. And then last but not the least, we looked at technology adoption. We looked at how technology was adopted across different sectors, which sectors had the highest level of adoption, what the impact of adoption was in terms of customer reach and sales. And we also even had insights around entrepreneurs who didn't adopt technology and the challenges that they face, whether from a digital literacy knowledge, digital access, internet problems, and all the other things that they felt were limitations to them addressing, adopting technology for use in their business. We also explored the impact of the Twitter ban on business, alongside also looking at the role of social media platforms and how our respondents ranked the importance of the key social media platforms in terms of their use, business growth, and business development. And then last but not the least, we talked about the challenges and opportunities. We looked at the challenges that were key. So a number of the challenges that were key were around issues around inadequate infrastructure, insecurity, and taxation. But we also looked at opportunities for which our respondents highlighted were important things for them to be able to grow and sustain a thriving business in Nigeria. So we have a 68-page report that we are sharing and we're launching today. We have the soft copy available. The link again is on the chat box, so please download it. We would like to engage with you on this report and all the insights there. Before I introduce the formal launch, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our partners and contributors to this report. So once again, I would like to acknowledge the support of Meta, who made the grant funding that was available to us to do the report. I would like to acknowledge the authors of this report, including Amaka Wokolo, who and her team, Oyebola and Godwin from our research side, worked on the report. I would like to acknowledge Wilson Erumebo, our economist and researcher on this project, who worked days and nights and weekends for that, and Gospel, who with his team at Streetonomics really ensured that we were able to have on-the-ground respondents across the 26 states that we reviewed. Thank you very much. We also acknowledge all the institutional partners, organizations, and networks who gave us access to them, to their time, to our entrepreneurs in person and virtually, and contributed to the different insights that we have. And they include the Abuja Enterprise Agency, the Access Bank, Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria, Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs West Africa, Endeavor Nigeria, the Enterprise Development Center of the Pan-Atlantic University, the Global Entrepreneurship Network Nigeria, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition Gain and the Scaling Up Nutrition Business Network in Nigeria, Impact Hub Lagos, Innovation Support Network, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, Lofty Inc. Limited, the Data for Good team at Meta, MSME Africa, National Association and Drug Administration and Control, National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and particularly the MSME Community of Practice, Nourishing Africa, Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, and the Ease of Doing Business Secretariat, Startups South, the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, the Southeast Angel Network, and the Women in Successful Careers, WISCA. Thank you very much. So now, to formally launch our report, please invite me as I welcome the founder and the chairman of Faith Foundation, Mr. Fola Adiola, to formally launch the report. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Adeyemi. Thank you very much, Chairman Talabi, for this extraordinary work. A lot has been said about the report by both of you, and all I need to do now is to present the report to the public and hereby launch the first Faith Institute State of Entrepreneurship in Nigeria report 2021, and add to the promise that Mrs. Adeyemi and Mr. Talabi made that it shall be annual. I hope the community finds it useful, and there are many improvements that we can make to this report should be made known to the Faith Institute, and we shall implement those improvements. Thank you very much. The report is hereby launched.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So now joining us on stage, we have our board director, Mrs. Sheyi Bella, who is also a partner at Banwo and Ighodalo. We have the head, Global Entrepreneurship Network, Nigeria, Dr. Olawale Anipowoshe, and we have our amiable executive director, Adenike Adeyemi. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much again, Adenike, for sharing those insights from the State of Entrepreneurship report. Okay. I am particularly looking forward to the conversations we are going to be having further in the program that would explore data around women-led businesses, youth-led businesses, and particularly technology adoption. Now, to move us further along in the program, I would like to invite Matt Smith, who is the Director, Research and Policy at the Global Entrepreneurship Network, to speak on the theme building an inclusive, cohesive, and sustainable ecosystem, while also providing a global perspective on enabling post-pandemic recovery for entrepreneurs. Matt, if you can hear me, you have the floor.
I can indeed, thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. This is a topic that is obviously being considered by governments and ecosystems worldwide. I think what we have all recognized is that when such a thing as COVID kind of shakes the entire world to the core, everyone is affected. As we've seen with the businesses, a lot of things sadly are no longer relevant. We've seen many businesses close down, either as an impact of lockdown or simply kind of obsolete due to changing needs of the population. But also there are a lot of new challenges to fix, and that's where entrepreneurs have already shown their value around the world. And in some cases, actually, it's bringing back solutions that perhaps hadn't worked previously that are now relevant. We are conducting this via Zoom, which was not really a thing pre-COVID, but is now helping me connect around the UK and the world. And of course, entrepreneurs thrive on this change. They are used to uncertainty, they are used to solving problems, and they're used to navigating uncharted water. And that means that it's not only the business community and the public that are looking to entrepreneurs to solve new and emerging problems, but also the government. And we've seen fascinating and brilliant startups and entrepreneurs around the world stepping in and getting new solutions up and running for governments, including COVID vaccination booking systems and all manner of platforms to help connect people as we were locked down last year. I wanted to talk about 3 different areas that we at Global Entrepreneurship Network see as kind of key topics that ecosystems and governments around the world are considering. Because I think one of the opportunities there is that not only does everything need to be reassessed from a business perspective, but also from a perspective of how ecosystems and governments support entrepreneurs. So I'd like to cover 3 brief topics: supporting entrepreneurs, strengthening ecosystems, and improving government policies. On the first one, supporting entrepreneurs, we've seen a lot of programs, both government-led and also ecosystem-led, to improve the resilience of entrepreneurs. In the UK, we've seen peer support networks facilitated. We've seen a lot of incubators and other business support programs calling on experts from the sports industry to provide mental resilience training to entrepreneurs. There have been many more formal business leadership programs launched around the world to support the individuals. In the US, we're seeing a lot of work with the likes of the Kauffman Foundation and the Center for American Entrepreneurship, looking at ensuring that entrepreneurs have equal access to support and services like pensions, healthcare, making sure that there are no barriers that are stopping individuals from starting businesses or growing them. We're seeing a lot more embrace of digital, obviously, making sure that entrepreneurs have got the skills and the access to technology to allow them to continue working through COVID, but also make the most of digital to reach new markets. Again, seeing a lot of coordination between multinationals, and I'm sure we'll hear from Meta and others later as to what they're doing to support and work with entrepreneurs to make sure that they can get online and trade and sell effectively. But also from an ecosystem perspective, in the UK, I coordinate a network of UK incubators. And we've seen really interesting approach to adapting their support to help entrepreneurs. And actually by digitizing their events, they've realized that they're able to reach far more people that perhaps would not traditionally be able to attend in person, given time constraints, working commitments, care commitments, and others. So actually from an ecosystem and business support perspective, there's a lot more that digitization has brought to entrepreneurship support. And also inclusion. Later this month, we will be working with the OECD to launch their 7th Missing Entrepreneurs report, which is looking at kind of business support for traditionally excluded groups. And I think that's a key focus for many governments looking to come back from COVID. The second option and opportunity is around strengthening ecosystems. A lot of countries are looking to build back better or level up and really make the most of COVID recovery to tackle some underlying structural problems that held back certain regions or communities previously. And I think one of the opportunities there is with digitization with digitization and the ability to offer support remotely, there is now a greater opportunity to support individuals in perhaps more rural or smaller towns that perhaps did not have access to support before. Related to that, there's an opportunity to attract resources and talent to these areas, not only supporting and nurturing local entrepreneurs, but also trying to encourage successful entrepreneurs to relocate and bring their talents and insights and expertise to other areas. And related to that as well is access to startup capital. What we've seen in the UK and elsewhere is that investors are now, thanks to Zoom and other platforms, willing to invest far beyond their home city and regions, and even looking beyond borders. A lot of demo days, pitch days have digitized and look to continue doing that indefinitely. And that means that entrepreneurs in areas that perhaps did not have access to finance pre-COVID, there are now the options and the possibilities to attract funding from remote investors. And finally, I want to touch briefly on policymaking. So with so many initiatives launched by government to support businesses during the COVID pandemic, many governments now remembering the importance of cohesiveness to bring together the variety of policies and programs that they're running. Many are looking to data-driven policymaking, making sure that they are following the data and understanding what's happening on the ground. There is an increasing importance in managing program portfolios, particularly with an ever-growing range of incubators, accelerators, and other government-led programs. Clearly, in COVID, there was a lot of rapid policymaking, and that's perhaps sped up decision-making and the processes through which governments have considered options and launched new policies. Hopefully, I think what we're seeing around the world is that there are lessons from that can be adopted to speed up policymaking more generally, while also taking the care and steps to ensure that they're not rushing things. And also, I think what we've seen from businesses stepping in and working with government to fix problems and provide solutions is the importance of not only improving procurement processes and helping entrepreneurs bid for and win government contracts more easily, but also the flexible regulatory approach that, for example, fintech sandboxes can bring to help fintech startups. I know Nigeria is one of several countries that have innovated around this already, but I think we'll see more of that in the years ahead as well. So overall, this is a very kind of topical discussion to have. I want to congratulate the Fate Foundation on launching this report. In the UK, the Centre for Entrepreneurs that I co-founded and continue to advise has reached the same conclusion that after several years of publishing research on a wide variety of topics, we now also wish to launch a State of Entrepreneurship report. So we'll be taking lessons from you as well. But thank you again for letting me contribute, and I look forward to listening to the rest of today's speeches.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for those insights that you have shared. Thank you very much. Before I let you go, I have some questions that I would like to ask, if you don't mind.
Of course.
You sort of touched on it when you were speaking, but I was wondering if you could just, expatiate on that, on what the role of government, private sector, and development sectors would be in enabling post-pandemic growth for entrepreneurs.
I think it's more important than ever that they are working together. I think where we have seen the fastest and smartest responses to COVID, there have been very close collaboration between entrepreneurs, trade bodies, and governments, really kind of working through ideas and options in an open format, testing things at a small scale and then scaling. But I think now more than ever, the kind of coordinated approach to policymaking between governments and entrepreneurs and the business community is necessary.
Thank you. I like what you said around multifaceted approach. And so my next question sort of touches on that, which is saying, could you share case study examples that you've probably witnessed in your work and in your role as Jen, that exemplifies how all of these different stakeholder groups are able to work together? One of the things we are striving to achieve is cohesiveness, so how do we create that handshake between these various stakeholder groups, the private sector, public sector, development sector? So if you could share some case study examples where this has been done and results have been achieved, I think it will be great to learn from such examples.
Yeah, one example that's emerging in the UK around financial technology startups, the government conducted a review of fintech recently, and it led to a couple of recommendations. Firstly, expanding the number of regulatory sandboxes for financial and regulatory technology startups, but also to launch a new forum that connects the regulators, the governments, the entrepreneurs and the trade bodies in a way that that will now be the primary source and platform for discussions around further fintech regulation. So I think that's one particularly good example of how the various stakeholders come together.
Thank you. So my final question would be around highlighting current opportunities for growth for everyone within the ecosystem now. What do you think are some opportunities that can be explored for growth?
Gosh, very good question. I think there are many opportunities that I think a lot of temporary short-term initiatives and fixes were enacted during lockdowns and during COVID. For example, how to mobilize volunteers for charities, a whole suite of different tech solutions created for that. Now is the opportunity to kind of bed down and formalize, make permanent some of these initiatives. So I think that is a particular opportunity. And I think there is just a lot more to do around embracing digital to expand business support, particularly to those that may not have had access before.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I like your last point on the emphasis you made rather on technology and digitalization. I think that's a strong point that we have seen emerge even with our research on the state of entrepreneurship report. So technology adoption, we've seen that scale a lot, and it will be great to explore that further in the conversations. But for now, I will let you go, and we'll come back to you during the Q&A if we have questions. Thank you very much again, Matt. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Matt Smith. Thank you. Now, moving on quickly, like I mentioned earlier, we're hosting this program today as part of activities marking the Global Entrepreneurship Week, right? To share a bit on the Global Entrepreneurship Week, please join me in welcoming the head of the Global Entrepreneurship Network Nigeria, Dr. Olawale Alefowoshe. Is he in? Okay, so moving on quickly, we are about to get into the meaty stuff, right, of our conversation today. We're going to be taking our very first panel conversation. This panel conversation will be looking at fostering innovation through technology. From the presentations, from the findings of the State of Entrepreneurship report that Adenike shared, and even building on the conversations that Matt Smith has shared, we see that there's an uptake in technology adoption and innovation, particularly during the pandemic with regards to pivoting to new businesses, accessing new markets, and developing homegrown solutions. This panel will be looking at the role of technology in business survival, business growth, accessing funding and new markets, and also fueling inclusive growth. Please share your questions in the question and answer segment. We'll have our team who will be collating those questions to ensure that they are addressed. Please also join us online using the hashtag FaithPDS. Join the conversation online. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming back stage. Adeyemi.
Thank you very much, Amaka. So we're going to have our first panel for today, as Amaka had said, which is around fostering innovation through technology. I would like to invite to this conversation our four panelists who are joining us online. The first is, if we had a body that we would call the mother of micro, small, and medium enterprises in Nigeria, it definitely would not be none other than the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Diko Umaru Rada, who is the Director General of SMEDAN. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Our second panelist, thank you very much. Our second panelist is Tubosun Alake, who is the Special Advisor to the Lagos State Government on Innovation and Technology. Tubosun leads the design from a policy program and even from a partnership perspective on ensuring an improvement in an innovative structure culture across the different segments within Lagos, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurship. You're welcome, Tubosun. Please do turn on your camera. Thank you. Our third panelist is Carlos Ahumada, who is the Public Policy Manager for EMEA and LATAM for Data for Good at Meta. So Data for Good is Meta's organization that really delves into data and insights and uses that to provide perspective from different social and economic issues, including but not limited to entrepreneurship matters. And so for the last, I believe, 2 years, Data for Good has launched an annual Global State of Small Business report, with Nigerian segments playing a very strong role within that, and you'll be sharing the insights from of those reports, particularly their most recent reports with us soon. You're welcome, Carlos.
Thank you.
And then, thank you. Joining our panel is Yewande Adewusi, who is the Regional Director, Africa for BBC Global News. Yewande is someone who is very interested and passionate really around enabling and supporting entrepreneurs and the ecosystem with the influence of media. And she would also be providing that perspective, also even with their experiences at BBC Africa, even showcasing and telling stories around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. You're welcome, Yewande. We're glad to have you. Okay. Great. So as Amaka has said, and one of the things that we found in our report was really the increased adoption of technology across the segments. And this was honestly something that we found as one of the good highlights of the report. Obviously, a lot of the response of having to work with engaged customers remotely and how that accelerated their digital literacy of different tools, and also even the availability of different tools for entrepreneurs to use. One of the things that was very important for us in looking at the insights from this report was that normally when we talked, as at about 2 years ago, when we had done a similar insight, when we looked at digital adoption, we would find that the digital adoption was higher with small and medium enterprises, particularly those who were in urban centers and who had better access to to areas that had better internet infrastructure and data technology. But one of the things that we saw that were real spotlights for us was that even across micro segments, even in semi-urban and even what you would even call rural areas, so to speak, that we had micro and small entrepreneurs, we saw that a number of the entrepreneurs we surveyed increased their use of technology across different aspects. And so my first question will be to Dr. Rada. And my question will be around him please helping to provide a perspective on what he sees around the growth and the use of Nigerian MSMEs with respect to technology adoption over the last 1 year. So looking at 2020 even to date. Dr. Rada, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say good morning to the chairman of the FED Foundation and all other management of the FED Foundation, as well as the speakers on this panel, as well as the audience. As you mentioned rightly, that macro enterprises and women-led businesses are the largest sector of the MSMEs that we have in the country. They constitute about 98% of the total MSMEs that we have. And then there are a lot of gaps really that exist in terms of technology adoption in the businesses around the macro enterprises and women-led businesses. But first of all, I would like to say that, majorly, most of these people that are into micro enterprises are people living in the rural area. Most of them are informal in their businesses. They have not formalized their businesses, and they lack what it takes because most of them did not attend Western education properly. So I think there are a lot of things. So majorly, one of the gaps I think that exists in that area is a lack of source of appropriate information, because they have to have information on how to source for appropriate technology to use in enhancing your businesses. So this has been a very huge challenge on the macro and women-led businesses. And also there is this thing that we have, aversion to vulnerable businesses to change. Introduce through technology. Technology brings a lot about changes in the way you do your things, the way you market your product, the way you produce your product. So those things also help resistance to those changes also is one of the things that create a huge gap in the adoption of technology in our businesses. Then, investment in technology requires a lot of financing. And then, those people at that bottom, they don't even know how to, they don't even have bank account, talk less of them sourcing for finance to invest in this technology. So I think it is also a very, very important factor we should look at. Inability to invest in acquiring skills on the use of the technology also, because you have to invest in acquiring the necessary skills to use the technology. And how do you do that? You have to spend some money, you have to invest some resources to enable you get the necessary skills to use the technology. And then, there is this gap, lack of access to research and development, because there is need between the research institutions and the small businesses on how they relate on the new technologies that are introduced into the system. So, but the lack of access to that research and development and lack of any other link that can link up the businesses with the research and development, especially the academia, is a very big challenge. But as much as there are challenges, there are opportunities that exist in the use of technology, such as you have to, it enhance value addition, because whatever you are doing, you add value to what you are doing. And how do you add value? You only add value through the use of technology easily. And once you add value, you are adding to their livelihood, their source of income. So I think it helps a lot in enhancing the value addition, and then access to more competitive market, because most of the markets you go now, you see most of the MSMEs using the technology, right technology, on how to access the market. So if you don't have the right technology, to penetrate the market, it makes competition very difficult for those macro businesses and women-led businesses. So adoption of technology is becoming very, very significant in the life of their businesses. Then opportunity for growth. Once you are able to access market, once you are able to add value in your production, and then you increase capacity utilization, then there are chances for you to grow. And once you grow, the economy improve, and then the wealth you created, and then you reduce the level of poverty. So I think these are the issues around the adoption of technology and use of technology in the macro enterprises and the women-led businesses.
Thank you, Dr. Rada. So you've identified a lot of the gaps around digital literacy in terms of the knowledge, particularly if you're looking at vulnerable groups such as micro businesses and micro businesses that are also women-led. You've also talked about access, and the access was in different ways. Access to tools, access to devices, access to resources, access to even data and to power that. There's also another aspect of technology that I also talked about, which may not necessarily be in terms of digital technology. Allows them in terms of payments, processing, accessing markets. Thank you for that data context. To build on that, I would like to call, I'd like us to now move to the point where we talk about some of the insights that we saw in the data for good small business report, particularly with respect to Nigeria. And so, Carlos, please, can you share with us some of the insights that you, the data and the perspectives that we saw from the recent Global State of Small Business report with specific reference to Nigerian data, and what small and growing businesses in Nigeria, particularly with respect to technology use?
Perfect. Thank you, Adenike. First of all, thank you for the Fate Foundation for the opportunity to share these insights, and congratulations on the report. So in our last Global State of Small Business survey conducted in July this year, we found that 75% of the small businesses that had a presence on Facebook platform in Nigeria reported to be actually operating or engaging in revenue generating activities. This represents a 2% increase from what was reported in our previous survey conducted in February. In other words, this means that more SMBs are operating now than earlier in the year. Although this is not a very high increase, this potentially could be interpreted as a sign of early economic recovery after the pandemic, particularly on the demand side. I think this might be particularly true since Nigeria is one of the countries with the less amount of SMBs, only 18% of them, that reported to be expecting a lack of demand in the near future. This is very good news and an opportunity that needs to be seized for sure in the country. However, regarding the number of SMBs with a presence on Facebook operating or engage in revenue generating activities, Nigeria is 6% behind in the global average. The way I read it is that if we take the example of other countries, there is still space for Nigeria SMBs to re-enter the cycle of revenue generating activities, contributing in this way to the economic dynamism at the national level. But coming back to the demand side, our survey also reflects that in July, 42% of these operational SMBs on Facebook in Nigeria were reporting lower sales compared to the same month last year, so in July 2020. Unfortunately, this is a 9% increase to what was reported in the survey in February, where 33% of SMBs in Nigeria were reporting lower sales compared to the same month last year. In other words, more SMBs are reporting lower sales in the second half of the year than in the first one when compared with months in the previous year. This might be reflecting the challenges the Nigeria economy has had in Q3 and Q4 after its good performance earlier in the year, and the roadblocks that SMBs in Nigeria have found on their way towards a sustainable and stable recovery path. But it is also important to recognize the global trend here and see that Nigeria is performing way better in this specific point than the global average. If we average all the countries, we see that 52% of SMBs were reporting lower sales compared to the same month last year, whereas in Nigeria, there were 42% of them reporting the same. This is a sign of the impact that COVID-19 has had globally, affecting particularly the supply chain side. Countries like Indonesia, Taiwan, and Vietnam are pushing the average, which means their SMBs are particularly struggling with sales during the second half of the year, whereas countries like the US, Ireland, and Germany, which are pushing the average down, seem to be on their way to recovery. Interestingly, all these countries, the ones with high and lower sales compared to last year, reported a similar proportion of SMBs, between 40% and 50% of them, who are making at least 25% of their sales online. So there is not a lot of difference between them. From my perspective, this means two things. The first one is that there is still a lot of opportunity for SMBs around the world to expand the share of their online and digital sales with all the advantages that could come with it, right? Like lower operating costs, reaching out new and sometimes distant markets, and so on. The second one is that tools for SMBs to access digital markets alone, from my perspective, are not the key to sustainable and growing path for them alone. These tools need to come with additional support from policymakers in guaranteeing a healthy and vibrant local economy and in facilitating the access of local SMBs to foreign markets via digital tools. Finally, I would like to end up with a very positive note. The number of women-led SMBs in Nigeria operating or engaged in revenue-generating activities went from 63% in February 2021 to 73% in July 2021. This is a 10% increase, but reading it as a 10% increase alone misses the whole picture from my perspective. It is a 10% increase in the middle of challenging times for entrepreneurs, such as lower sales, like a burden in the economic performance, and so on. So this reflects, for me, the resilience and capacity that women-led SMBs in Nigeria have to adapt to the market and to overcoming difficulties and finding ways in which they can continue operating. At the same time, it may also be a sign of women-led SMBs in Nigeria building up companies with strong foundations since their conception to overcome the difficulties and challenges of the market. And here is another reason, among many others, on why women-focused policies increasing participation in entrepreneurship is key for the development of our communities, and the only way in which we can have healthy, inclusive, cohesive, and vibrant entrepreneurship ecosystems around the world.
Thank you, Carlos. You've answered one and even part of my second question to you. But you shared with us very interesting insights based on the data, the most recent report from the Data for Good, and you've also juxtaposed it with the earlier reports this year and also last year. So we're seeing some early economic recovery. We're seeing growth in terms of looking at women-led businesses, at least based on the respondents, SMBs that use Facebook. But we're still seeing some areas of concerns if we even compare Nigeria with other countries around the world, despite the impact of the pandemic. Thank you very much. Tubosun, I would like to move to you. From a state level perspective, I remember the first time we had a conversation with you, probably about 18 months ago, and you talked about the work that you were doing around just even designing the innovation ecosystem. For entrepreneurs to have easier and faster access to technology use in the different ways and the formats, there also has to be the structure and the enabling environment for that to happen. So from the lens of innovation, and obviously looking at the Lagos State example, what do you see is the innovation ecosystem within Lagos State? And how do you think that influences the rate of adoption or otherwise that we see with the ways entrepreneurs use technology for growing their businesses or can better use it? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
So perhaps to contextualize the question properly, let me perhaps shed some light on what we do, especially through the auspices of the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council. I think we started our operations right in the middle of the pandemic. We started around, well, at the beginning of the pandemic, February 2020. Apart from trying to influence policy through my office and my portfolio, we directly intervene in the technology sector. So we have the Science Research and Innovation Council maintains a fund that we use to resource innovative startups and innovative MSMEs. And we do that through call outs, through partnerships and other activities. And so we've taken a direct approach into the innovation ecosystem. And the objectives are pretty clear, is to begin to create innovation pipelines that would lead to better or newer products and services that would grow the economy. And so I use the example of when the internal combustion engine was first invented, right? And the kinds of industries that created. That's one of the primary functions of the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council, to create new streams of the economy to grow jobs, to grow capital, and what have you. And so since we began in February of 2020, we've been resourcing innovative startups that have very unique business models or that have inventions. So thus far, we fund research, pure basic and applied research through our universities. So today we have about 18 pure basic and applied research initiatives that we are monitoring for patents. And if you know the ideas behind patents, patents are original inventions that once they are gotten, you can build companies around those patents that they become products, and people can get hired, economic value is created. And so that is our own approach to really trying to perhaps create new paths for the economy, especially at the subnational level. But we know whatever happens in Lagos will affect the entire economy. Apart from directly intervening in the innovation ecosystem and helping to foster new inventions and creations, we also influence policy. We've been a big part of the startup bill that has been going around recently to enable faster access to markets, quicker registration policies within government, a much more interlinked business and commerce environment. I think that's the most important thing. I think when we launched our council, one of the things we noticed was that there weren't enough connection links within the ecosystem. For instance, the universities are a big part of this ecosystem. They are a source of talent, right? They need to be directly connected to industry, right? When there's a symbiosis where industry requires talent, industry creates new products, that informs the educational curriculums and the knowledge directly in the educational ecosystem. So all those links need to be there, and we serve as some sort of a bridge to connect those to drive economic value. So we are influencing from a policy perspective. We are directly intervening by funding entrepreneurs, innovative entrepreneurs within the ecosystem, and we are influencing policy. And we are also making stronger links between ecosystem players, so development partners, education, industry. One of the things that we are designing now is a labor market information system in real time, so that entrepreneurial reports like this are actually real time. So you see information as they happen. That's extremely important. That's being led by the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. And without that robust data platform, we are not able to respond quickly. And I think that's going to be a difference going forward. So these are some of the activities that we spearhead and we support within Lagos State. And we are contributing to a lot of federal programs as well to resource them better, just like the startup bill. And we hope that that will definitely drive entrepreneurial levels in the country.
Thank you, Tuboso. And you've started to drive the point home around the conversations we've been having around collaboration. So first, from academia, how do you even also build and enable these talents from school level? So whether senior secondary school education levels or tertiary levels, College of Technologies like Yaba Tech in Lagos, and even the universities that we have. So you're building the talent, the knowledge right from school, but you're also linking it with industry so that whatever technologies are being innovated or built or meets with it aligns with what the market needs, so that people are developing solution services products that can be put in the market and can even be used to build businesses. And then you also talked about the role of government in providing a perspective of where the gaps and where the opportunities are. The role of government in also participating in ensuring policy, like the startup bills. There's a contributive approach to the policy development, but the policy is also in alignment with the type of environment we want to see, and also ensuring that particularly young people are also involved with that. You've also talked about accelerating access to finance too, and even finance, but also technical. So you talked about even the IP requirements and also all the other things to ensure that when these ideas are gotten, they also have the right patent support and all they need to have. Thank you very much, Tuboso. Yeah, Wande. So my first question to you would be looking at technology, but really beyond social media, because even when we were doing the survey, it was very important for us to talk about technology and use by entrepreneurs beyond just saying the marketing side of it, which is very, very important. So my first question to you will be for you to please share the insights around the importance of thinking of storytelling and technology use in helping to support and grow entrepreneurs and even facilitate a productive entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Thanks, Nika. Well, BBC Global News, we're storytellers, whether we're telling stories about the news or on my side of the business, commercial, where we're telling stories for brands to communicate what their purpose is, how they're trying to connect with their audience and create that brand affinity. So storytelling is everything. Gone are the days of slamming people with buy this now. They just don't want that sort of communication. So nothing inspires a customer more than telling the story. And one might say, why do I need to do this? Every brand has to have a story. And you have to have a really unique story to tell, because if your brand can't convey its story, then your products will not have much appeal to your audience. And then what you're also trying to do with the storytelling process is captivate your audience, prompt online discussions, and I'll get into how you achieve that. You get social sharing amongst your target community, and then ultimately sales, which is what every SME wants. And basically through the right storytelling, you're cutting through the noise, because there's a lot of competition out there, and you want to make sure they remember you. Everybody's making scented oils or some sort of digital marketing company, but how do I remember you? And it's through your unique storytelling. So we found that if you can create an emotional connect to your brand on a very personal level, then, and you'd couple that with leveraging the digital channels you have available to ensure that customers are engaged and you're influencing them, And so I'm going to link the storytelling to the tech in just a mo. And some SMEs will say, oh, I'm not Nike, I'm not Unilever, I can't afford to do a grand commercial. And quite frankly, that's where the power of technology has come in. You don't need that. You literally need images and the power of words. And therefore, you don't need to worry about a budget. Just make sure you've got the right images that's relating to your brand, and therefore you put them on the relevant platforms. So the things to consider when you're trying to tell a story is, what is the point of the story? I mean, like every good book, we want to know, what's the point of this? Why am I listening to you? Why am I looking at these images? Why am I talking to you? And I want to know tell me what you want your brand to know about you as a brand. Two, every SME is out there. We always say the whole reason for going into business is to solve a problem. So what problem are you solving? Tell that through your story as well. And also we found, especially in the younger consumer market, they're really concerned about brand values. They want to know, are you sustainable? Are you committed to green processes and all that sort of thing? So what are your values? Are you ethically producing your product? It's so important these days, especially when targeting the youth, the younger segment. Secondly, give me a reason to relate to your brand. I mean, I need to connect with you emotionally. I need to know, what are you doing? Why do I like this brand? Is it the imagery? Is it the colors? Is it, and that sort of thing. So it's all very all-encompassing to create that emotional connect. And I'll keep saying that throughout this process, because gone are the days of having a really loud commercial that's just shouting the product. It just doesn't work for the consumers this day, especially when we engage digitally. So spark emotion through these images. Like I said earlier, it's the words, it's the images. So you find that if you match an image with the verbiage, you're creating that emotional spark that's going to make us stick with your brand. And then finally, I'd say take your customers on a journey with you. And I think that's where SMEs really should really embrace, because I started this business because, okay, if you take J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter, she was pretty much broke, almost homeless, and then she started. So you take us on a journey of how you've gotten from where you started, what made you start, or maybe something happened at work, you were let, that sort of thing, you were let go, and you started this. I started making soaps, and then I sold it to my friends, and then somehow a supermarket. If you take people on that journey, you'll find that it's really connecting them to that. So how does the tech help all this storytelling? One, social. I know we said it, or you said it's not just about the social, it's you leveraging the right social, and little at the beginning. You're not a huge brand, and SMEs are usually, they're the one-man band, CFO, CMO, CEO, CTO, and everything. So you need to be really focused on how you're leveraging social. Take a couple of platforms. Your website is your HQ, I always say. That's where I'm going to go into depth to find out different things about you. But in terms of social, maybe you start with an Instagram campaign and also some Facebook, and you call it a day, and then you just focus on that and make it really structured. And also your email marketing is where you really get to tell the stories that people have time, because a lot of people think that email marketing is such a waste, but quite frankly, you find that a lot of people engage and really take time to read the content there if it's presented in the right way, images and the right words and the right headers. The second thing, so that's going social and leveraging email marketing. The third way SMEs can really leverage tech using the various platforms, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Twitter, is using small scale influencers. You're not Coke, so you can't have a big brand celebrity like Tiwa Savage or whoever, or David O, but you can have these really small micro influencers that have a really niche audience that speaks to your customer base, and therefore you're speaking to them directly. They already have an engaged audience, and you're just leveraging them to reach that audience a lot faster than you would on your own. And finally, another thing that's the ease of going through the platforms like Facebook and Google and Instagram is that paid advertising. What that does, when you put the right audience figures in terms of targeting, you have to be really micro-targeted. I want 16 to 30-year-olds who live in Lagos, who like skydiving, and be very focused. And that's what the power of digital, because there's a lot of technology. Everybody just sees it as Facebook and Instagram. There's a lot of data behind it so that you can reach a specific audience. So you need to really target that, and then just pay for to get a wider audience than you would on your own. So that would be what I'd say, how you leverage.
Thank you, Yewande. Thank you very much. And one thing that I want to note is that when we did the survey, we had a lot of people who were running incubators, accelerators, business support providers here, who are also developing curriculum and content to support entrepreneurs in terms of their marketing strategy and storytelling strategies. A question I'm going to come to you on later is that what stories does the ecosystem need to tell better to support and develop an inclusive ecosystem? So I'll come back on that. Yes. Dr. Rada, you talked about a lot of challenges that are being faced in terms of access and literacy rates and rates and all of that. I want to ask you two questions in one. What has SMEDAN been doing, whether from a policy facilitation level or from program design level, to improve and enable micro and small entrepreneurs in particular, to enable them increase their adoption of technology? What are the challenges that you face, and what do other people here who are doing different things, who are financing in the space, enabling infrastructure, who are even business support development services providers, need to know in designing programs that can enable and facilitate better adoption, particularly from a micro and small medium level, and if you're looking at women-led businesses in particular?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I think SMEDAN as an organization, we came up with a lot of innovations in terms of technology support for MSMEs.
If I may, sir, your camera angle, if you can, so that we can see your, yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, you still are losing the top part of your head, but yes, if you can adjust, much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think SMEDAN came up with a lot of technological support for MSME during the COVID-19. And as you rightly know that COVID-19 came with its own, but it has really increased the level of use of technology and information technology as well. Because so SMEDAN as an organization, what we did was we came up with a digital academy. This digital academy was meant to give capacity building to all these macro small enterprises. At the comfort of their houses, at the comfort of their homes, they can go into the system and they can get certified on different levels of capacity building in the area of entrepreneurship education. And then we also created an Market Hub app, which can be downloaded from the Google Play Store. And the Market app is to link up the different product and the customers on the platform so that they can sell their product without going through difficulties during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we did this product technology exhibition platform in conjunction with the Guangzhou African Guangzhou Business Association. And this technology exhibition platform is meant to provide a platform in which macro enterprises and small enterprises can source for their equipments without necessarily going anywhere, and they can do their business with the fabricators of those technology directly, and they can buy their product and do whatever they want to do with it to enhance their technological advancement in the discharge of their businesses. And then we also had a program, Google Digital Skill Training for Women and Youth. This digital Google Digital Skills is to enable them to use the platform to engage in their business using those platforms. And it's a very, very good platform that can help the businesses to grow and to develop. And then we also created enterprise hubs. These enterprise hubs are enabling environment we create in the universities or in the federal polytechnics so that we can provide an environment for those people who have an ideas. They want to put those ideas into businesses or they want to commercialize those ideas. They will go into those enterprise hubs and they will be mentored in the enterprise hubs, and they will have data to use 24 hours and electricity 24 hours in those enterprise hubs to enable them digest whatever they want to digest and produce a business idea that can grow into commercialization. And we did about 3 at the moment. We did one in conjunction with the Yaba Tech in Lagos, and we built another one in BUK. That is Bayero University, Kano, and then there is another one in Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University in Bauchi. But the one that is functional now is the one with the Yaba Tech Polytechnic. And then we have a lot of plans for the technological advancement of MSMEs. One of it is conversion of the IDCs. You know, we have 23 IDCs in the country which are moribund, and then the machines in the IDCs were obsolete, and then it has dilapidated, the structures were dilapidated. So we want to convert them into enterprise hub for a specific products. And we could not achieve that without the help of the African Development Bank. They funded the project of the conversion of the IDCs into cluster hubs that will meet the global challenges. So we have started with a pilot project in Abuja. It has reached 80% completion now, which will focus on furniture and woodwork. And then the idea of it is to provide common machineries in those IDCs and common facilities in those ICs that will allow any MSME that are into furniture business to come and do their activities in those IDCs, and they will find all the machineries they may require to produce their products. And we have provided places where they can do a showroom and showcase their products. And this enterprise and the machineries that we are providing is to meet the international standard. And this is also going to help them in this share facility will help them to progress in their business. And then we also produce machineries and equipment catalog for MSMEs, especially the macro businesses, because with that machinery and equipment catalog, it will enable the MSME to access that through those informations we provided, and to see which machinery or equipment can fit in their production and which one can help enhance their production. And then we also embark on the technology sourcing for the benefit of the MSMEs through the research and development in the higher institutions of learning. So the idea behind that is to provide a lot of information on the recent researches conducted in the universities as to use of technology in improving their business. That will go a long way in helping the macro businesses and the small businesses in improving their technological utilization of their businesses. Then we also introduce a program called OLOP to encourage the use of technology in processing. That is, we identify an organic cluster, and then we identify also the common machinery they may require to scale up their production and to improve their branding and quality of their production through the use of technology, as well as the provision of a working capital to them with no interest rate, and then which they are only to return 70% of the money, and the 30% is part of government incentive to help them build on their businesses. So I think these are some of the steps Sweden has taken to help support MSMEs, especially the macro and women-led enterprises, in the use of technology and also how to help grow their businesses through the use of innovation and technology.
Thank you, sir. Just before we continue, I wanted to mention that we're now taking questions in the Q&A box on the Zoom webinar panel. And I would also like to encourage our panelists, please, for those that you can easily respond to, please do respond to the ones that are specifically designated to you. I'm also getting quite a lot of the questions, and I'm going to add them to the questions I'm asking. But if our panelists could please respond to that, we'll do that. Tubosun, Dr. Rada just spoke around some of the new programming or renewed, revamped programming around hardware technology development. You know, the role of hubs, and you had alluded to that in your introductory response. How do you create, if you think of like the North Carolina Triangle, where you have a lot of, you know, you have institutions, you have spaces, whether directly linked to tertiary institutions or with incubation sectors or set up by government, where people can come in, people can get access to research, to tools, to equipment, and it's also a supply and demand space. I know, for instance, Edo State has, about 2 or 3 years ago, I went to one of the Msmbs industrialization place where they had somewhere for people who were translating plastic into other different plastic products, and MSMEs who needed technology could go there, could do, it was a plug and play. If you also needed to buy the finished products, you could go there. If you needed to buy products, you go there. So my question is going to build on something one of our participants, Olushola Kayode, had asked around research-intensive hubs can be used to increase access to novel technologies. What do you think are the opportunities and the gaps that exist? Because the idea of incubation centers, as an example, is not new. We've had it there. Part of the challenges we've had is renewing and keeping in line with the way technology is going, but also capacitating. And we can't always rely on government to do that. So what do you think are the opportunities that exist for government in terms of pooling that access and resources, but also in terms of even other partners that we may not even talked about to collaborate and work? And if you can even be specific, I like it, because sometimes we in the middle, a lot of us who are like enterprise development centers, researchers in the middle, where you find people in the private sector saying that if we don't invest in entrepreneurs in this space, it also affects our own businesses and corporates as a whole. And then government is saying that there are opportunities for that. So what is the gap? And how do we bridge that? How do we enable that supply and demand coordination and then overall impact?
Okay, great. And I think that's a top-notch question. I think the issue is really the linkages, right? There are a lot of siloed activities within ecosystems. And because industries are not created in silos, there are multidisciplinary teams that need to be engaged. I'll give you an example. So the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council got its first patent about 3 months ago. It was a ambivent ventilator that was done in partnership with University of Lagos. Of course, the government itself does not have those kinds of multidisciplinary teams employed. So you need to partner with a higher institution. So, and on that project, there were medical doctors, medical informatics, electrical engineers, developers, signals people, all about a team of almost 10 people for one product, right? And right now, that product is also going through clinical research. And there's a pipeline for also standardizations, organizations. So as you can see, there are lots of linkages for us to be able to create economic value. And I think that is one of the major functions of government. And also institutions or institutes or organizations, not-for-profit organizations and things like that, is to begin to link up all of the disparate entities that require economic value to grow. You understand? So on that project, for instance, we had all these multidisciplinary teams from the universities, from the institutes, you know, that came together for this thing. And that particular ventilator was supposed to be engineered, because when the pandemic hit, we knew there was a ventilator shortage across Africa. And at $15,000 an average price, I mean, it's well beyond the reach of many hospitals. So we had the challenge of engineering something sub $1,000 that could also be deployed to rural areas, right? In fact, one of our startups that we also funded last year came up with a non-electric ventilator. They got a UK engineering prize or so in the UK. And there were multidisciplinary teams that worked on that as well. So if we look at how we can engineer this in Nigeria, if we look at, for instance, the Fraunhofer Institutes in Germany, right, that have many partnership organizations, and the Fraunhofer Institutes themselves also compete for government contracts through their many stakeholders, which in turn helps the capacity of the institute. And they also act as rapid prototyping centers through their network of partners, right? And so the government directly funds through the Fraunhofer Institute's rapid prototyping labs, right? And so venture capitalists are also within the Fraunhofer Institutes. They see some of these inventions and they're like, okay, great, I'm going to fund that, right? Or I'm going to fund this. So what we need really are strong linkages between all the siloed parties.
Who does the linkages? Who does the linkage? So that we're bringing it very practical now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So primary responsibility, the government has to set the underlying foundation, right? And then other secondary responsibilities, right? Such as the educational institutions, both public and private, right? And non-for-profit organizations who have a responsibility of also informing government on the right approaches. Apart from that, we also need to remember the legislature, right? The legislature, right, and a lot of organizations usually look to the executive because they are the implementation arm. But the legislature is very, very important to the creation of this linkage institute. You cannot do it without them. So it's very important that private industry, especially, formulates and mobilize to also drive legislative action, because that drives what the executive will implement. So in a sense, I think that's what needs to happen.
What are some of the other opportunities for private sector? So if we even use Lagos State as an example, what are some of the other opportunities that you think also exist beyond that? We've talked about enabling legislation to facilitate that. We've talked about government being that coordinator in terms of that. But what do you think are some of the, even if it's not opportunities, maybe from the perspective of what are the misconceptions that you think private sector has that needs to be changed to also facilitate what we're speaking about?
So I just mentioned it. If you look at the United States, for instance, corporations have strong lobbying groups, right? The private sector actually determines a lot of legislation, right? It's not just government, because government, of course, 80% of the economy of Lagos is the private sector. That's a huge mobilization power that needs to be utilized to drive the kind of policy changes that it wants to see, right? And so I should see major companies and small association companies, whether it's MSMEs or startup groups, at the legislature submitting papers, driving subcommittee groups within the legislature to drive those things. And even our organization, the Science Research and Innovation Council, has had one or two policy dialogues with people within the ecosystem to help drive the policy. Those policy dialogues actually led to our first Innovation and Technology Master Plan, which we are driving. This Science Research and Innovation Council is a product of that Innovation and Technology Master Plan. And many other projects that we are doing, where as a result of this, should I say linkages, this linkage activities. So I think the private sector must help drive legislation strongly, right? And I think the institutes, right? The physical institutes that serve as those points of linkages must also be done, of course, being driven by government, but mostly by legislation. It all comes back to legislation again, and that's why the legislature is very important. But as you know, Lagos State is supporting a ton of the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, Economic Recovery Fund supported almost 4,000 businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic from a grant perspective and a loan perspective. So the executive really drives and implements a lot of enabling actions. But like I said, ultimately, if we're going to solve the entrepreneurial gaps that we have, the linkages must be formulated, they must be enacted. And I think that's where we will really get the kind of bang for our buck.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Carlos, in addition to what has been said, what do you think are the other critical enablers for facilitating access to technology for Nigerian businesses? I mean, Meta has one of the largest markets and users of the platform, whether individuals or from small businesses. So what do you think are important enablers to increase that access?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think many of the points that I wanted to touch upon were already mentioned by the panelists, but I would like to highlight some of them. So first of all, I think that it's important to increase the network infrastructure, its efficiency and speed of the internet access across the country. And for these private-public partnerships have proved to be important in advancing in this topic, as Mr. Alaka was mentioning in his last intervention. The public and private partnerships. Second one, it's important to facilitate access to financial services, particularly those that through technology facilitate the banking, insurance, and financing processes. Third, and related to this, is to increase the financial support for technology-driven companies and startups and entrepreneurs coming both from the private and public sectors, and support talent, support young entrepreneurs with ideas, promote the generation of their ideas. Then I would like to mention also something that Dr. Rada was touching upon, that is these clusters and the identification of clusters. So promoting peer-to-peer knowledge transfer schemes, from my perspective, is very important. So if we facilitate communication between entrepreneurs that have been dealing with technology and technology incorporation, this would be very useful for increasing the penetration of technologies in this sector. Also, it's super important to support academic research within, again, as Mr. Alak was mentioning, within multidisciplinary teams, providing wider perspectives on topics. And in this regard, also support the database analysis, such as the one that Fate Foundation is making, right? Only with data and evidence-based insights we can improve. Another point that I identify is support SMEs in the implementation of digital marketing strategies, as it was mentioning before, leveraging the opportunities that come with it, such as cheaper advertising costs compared to non-digital channels, or the access to new and distant markets. Then two last points. The first one is to start early, and start early means provide education to young people in a way that they can understand technology and leverage the opportunities that it brings for developing an entrepreneurial mindset. I personally believe that around the world, we need to educate people more for ideas generation, creativity, which leads to entrepreneurship, and start educating our younger generations less for jobs in the traditional sense of it. And finally, related to this last point, is increasing the data literacy among SMEs owners so that they can make use of the input that digital markets can provide in terms of business intelligence, but also at the same time continue with the deep integration of data in the decision-making processes at the government level. I believe that evidence-based policies have higher potential to create positive impact in our communities, and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And for this, I would like to invite our panelists and the audience to visit Data for Good. At Meta, we have a lot of privacy preserving tools that can help the policymaking process for stakeholders working with entrepreneurial and entrepreneurship systems. So I think there are many more, but like those are the ones that I would like to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And then Yewande, to you, I think I'd already shared the second question I wanted to ask. One of the things that, is always very obvious to us is that there are different perspectives of the ecosystem people see based on what is being shown and what is being communicated. And so when you talk about entrepreneurship or the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it means different things to different groups. So what stories do you think that all the stakeholders here, so aside from the entrepreneurs, but people who are designing policy, facilitating collaboration, supporting training, incubating, what is the story? How do we provide perspectives that better showcase the journey and the opportunities and the possibilities within the entrepreneurship ecosystem?
Well, first and foremost, we have to highlight the entrepreneurs that you're trying to support, right? I find we tell the same stories about the same entrepreneurs over and over and over and over. So sometimes they're hidden gems that you, the ecosystem builders, know about that we all don't know about out there. And if you're not telling the stories about these hidden gems, we're missing a trick, because we're all the investors, all the partners, all the funding is going to go to the same people we're always hearing about. But the people that are at the first line, especially the seed funders, are the ones that are finding these unique hidden gems that nobody's going to know about until they become big. And at that point, everybody's going to be at them, right? So that's one thing the ecosystem builders need to talk about. They need to engage, have interviews with founders, and even like the ecosystem builders as well. They can create these sort of, I would like to say almost like a platform where they're sharing their stories across. So there's a collaborative approach to this. It's not a secret unless you're trying to keep your success story to yourself and you don't want anybody else to know about them. But if you do want others to know about them, which is the whole point of this ecosystem building, then all of you should be coming together to tell these stories on a platform in terms of what was the initiative. So we have all these initiatives, this fund, this grant, this project, this technical assistance. But okay, what happened? They'll announce we gave 200,000 to this person, and then what happened? We don't know. It just dies. So if there isn't that continuous journey of telling the story of what happens to okay, you had a round, announce it. What was the process of the round? We had 500 applicants, 25 got the grant or whatever. This is the story. We went to Kaduna and we followed someone who was doing micro insurance for someone raising chickens in the middle of nowhere. And then that's the whole point. How did they do that? So someone else will be like, oh, really? You could actually do that? And that's the whole point of stimulating the conversation I mentioned earlier, because at the end of the day, the stories need to stimulate conversation in the social space. Someone can really do, because everything seems unattainable until the story is told, right? And so that's why the ecosystem needs to continuously have that situation where we did step by step, we launched this grant round, or we launched this research piece. This particular company used it to test their hypothesis, and this is the result of it. And now they're saying that they're twisting or changing their approach to business, because using your research, they found that the approach they had intended isn't going to work. So these are the things that people, and then that will teach entrepreneurs that, oh, wow, there's a value of using research. So these are the things that, stories that aren't being told. Also in terms of, there's also a problem with the whole gender lens focus. It's not, I mean, nowadays we're now having a heavy focus on females because we did identify a huge gap that funding was going majority to men. I don't want to put a percentage before you guys take your stats and catch me out. But in terms of now that we've found it through the research that women businesses are typically more successful, but they don't get the funding because it's quiet. There's no story told about them. So unless we put them out there, we're always going to have that problem where the funding goes to the noise making men-led businesses because they know the importance of it, but women are distracted by all sorts of things. So, and like we said, you're the CMO, you're the CEO, the CIO, the chief customer service officer. Sometimes marketing and that storytelling process gets lost. So you need to figure out how that's done. And another reason the ecosystem needs to be telling these stories is that it builds credibility for the entrepreneur involved, for even the funds involved, that you are giving the money out and someone received it and they had a benefit and there was growth and or not. And that needs to be out there as well. And you need to shape the narrative around entrepreneurship. You know, sometimes it's always seen, it's only this big company that comes out of nowhere. If you don't tell people there's a journey, they're going to think, wow, I just became an entrepreneur and I blew up, if I can use that term. But if you're telling the story of the journey, they'll know you need to know the process of what it is to become an entrepreneur. You might rethink, do you want to do this? And if you do, this is what you need to be aware of. So I would just say the ecosystem needs to identify a whole range across sector of players in the entrepreneurial space, the ones that we're aware of and the ones that we've never heard of at all that are doing very unique things. And it's easy for them. Create a standard set of questions. You don't have to keep changing it every time because that can be time consuming. I can imagine for the Fate Foundation or whoever doesn't have that sort of person who's constantly wanting to tell stories. You just same set of questions and ask it over and over and over to different players, even to the ecosystem builders. And you have multiple voices and perspectives. So that would be what I'd say. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Excellent points, honestly. You know, I liked your quote. Everything seems unattainable until the story is told. We can't build an inclusive ecosystem if our storytelling is not inclusive. We have to also show the journey, the start, the beginning, all of that, because it's also inspiring. That's also how you create inspiration to the entrepreneurs. If people don't see faces of people that look like them, are like them, and show different representations, then there's a challenge also in encouraging them to get into that space. And media technology is also very good and useful in facilitating that. And then it also helps to create accountability. Also even across board. Thank you. So time is up, but we'll take the last round of questions, including questions that we've also seen on the Q&A box. So Dr. Rada, we've had a lot of questions. Number of them have to do with how people can get access to Msmbs programs, activities. You've spoken around a lot of programs that you've done in terms of technology, the incubation programs you're doing, the digital literacy programs that you're doing. So the last question I'll ask you is that, how can people get access to the programs? So people in terms of the SMEs now, MSMEs now, how do they know, how do they reach Msmbs, and how do they find out about these programs? That's number one. Number two is, how can other people in the space also connect with Msmbs to also work and support you and your teams across the country in that? Dr. Rada.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this valid question. I think we have a lot of information posted in our website on how to get access to most of our programs and how to get much information about our programs. And physically, we have offices in all the 36 states of the Federation, including FCT. And the details of the addresses of all those offices are in our website. And then you can get all the information you may require about those things that we are doing as an agency and how to get access to those activities that we are doing. And in some cases, we advertise on some of our projects so that all interested MSMEs can apply and then get access and then link up to the program. As to other organizations, Msmbs has identified one key factor, which is a very important factor in the development of our economy as a whole. Lack of proper synergy between the public and private sector, as well as especially within the public sector. You see that there are so many agencies of government that are doing one thing or the other for the development of MSME, but you hardly see a link between one agency to another, which is really very detrimental to the development of MSMEs and growth. And so everybody is doing silo, and then everybody is going silo. I don't know, but whatever we are doing it for the benefits of Nigerians and for the Nigerians to get something out of it. We are not competing. We are not doing anything. Ours is to provide services to the country. And for the private sector also, there is need for a very intensive collaboration. But we are working seriously on that, because if you look at the reverse national policy that was just approved by the Federal Executive Council, and we have sought collaboration of both international and local partners, and then a lot of organizations that have something to do with MSME, all the major stakeholders, to enable us to develop a implementation matrix for the policy, and also to coordinate the actualization of the implementation of the policy. And we are getting a lot of help. And I think this collaboration should continue. And what we are even doing today is part of the partnering and collaboration effort between the public and private sector, which we need to do more for the benefit of the MSMEs. And SMEDA as an agency is taking steps to make sure that there is this synergy, and then there is sourcing of even beneficiaries of this kind of programs from our partners as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rada. Tubosu, we had two questions, at least two questions that I can see around policies. So on the one hand, there's a perspective that government also creates infrastructures and supports and enables innovation. But on the other hand, there is also the perception, and we also had that also in terms of the survey that we did, that there are policies that are also mitigating innovation. So people want to, people are in a particular space, and you have a lot of young people in particular who are also innovating and developing businesses, and a policy comes up and then stalls or provides a roadblock to that. What are your thoughts on this? What do you have to say about that?
I think largely what
oh, sorry, I was asking Tubosu, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Tubosu, over to you.
Okay, great. For most of it, it can be perception, because as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, the things we are trying to do in, first of all, the startup bill, and also trying to localize some enabling policies in Lagos. I think what we really need to do is establish a collaborative forum, so that when policies are being enacted, both private sector development agencies are all in the room. And I think that is the approach that the startup bill has taken. So the buy-in, I believe, is going to be much more significant than perhaps other previous laws that have been enacted in the past. And again, it may sound like a broken record, but I think those linkages, the siloed natures of public, private, the entrepreneurship industry is very, it needs to be bridged as soon as possible. There are a lot of enabling things that we are doing, as you can see, probably people didn't know about. People didn't know we had patents and all of that. We've supported almost 25 startups. So why I say it's perception is that if we are doing all these activities, then it's not consistent with what people might think. So there needs to be more communication. And I love what Yewande said about telling the stories. I think that is particularly one area I would say government is really lacking. The ability to frame the conversation within the right context to be able to deliver the kinds of information value to entrepreneurs. And I think that's one piece that is missing. So with people like Yewande, us collaborating with them, they're able to help us frame these stories much better. But like I said, it's mostly perception, because if we are intervening, trying to enable all of these startups, research institutions, and research projects, it's not particularly, if logically, it's not particularly consistent with trying to stifle, right? Even though there might be definitely unintended consequences. But I think the lesson is to increase the collaborative approach between the public and the private sector so that both understand where they are coming from. A typical policy initiative within Lagos State, for instance, has to take into account the different sectors, the trade unions, for instance, the labor unions, right? Has to take into the mom and pop markets, has to take into consideration the artisan network, right? And also the infrastructural community, the engineering. There's so much. It's large. So private sector also needs to understand that and know that, look, there are a lot of stakeholders to please. It's not very easy. And so the communication, I think, will improve the perception. And I think that's really it.
Thank you. I want to mention, somebody sent me a private message that perception, it can sometimes be reality. So, but thank you for also shedding the highlights that.
And sometimes it's not always reality as well. It can be and it might not be.
True. The last question I have for this panel, and then we'll round up. We have a question, and I think it's addressed at Meta. What are the opportunities Meta sees around investment, enabling access for internet, for business and fostering inclusion of disadvantaged segments, particularly in rural, micro, and women-led businesses? I'd like to invite Adaora Ikende, who is the head of public policy for Meta in West Africa, to respond to that question.
Thank you so much, Adenike.
Yes, Adaora, please. You're welcome.
I know we're pressed for time, so I'm just very quickly going to say it's a broad spectrum of things. And really, at Meta, we understand that because of the way we've grown, the ability to build communities really depends on keeping people connected, and the ability to support both the traditional and the entrepreneurial businesses depends on people having access and being and being connected. And we also recognize that these communities come in all sizes, across all regions. They're not currently served by traditional methods. Urban areas don't have sufficient bandwidth, and in remote areas, the technology is expensive, not only to access, but even to deploy. So really what we're trying to do is we're looking at, we know that there's no silver bullet for this. There's no single technology or program. So rather than look at a one size fits all, our investment strategy is looking at a building blocks process. We're actually designing different technologies for specific use cases. And then those are used together, really, to connect the different communities and the different spaces and the different use cases to be able to maximize their access to the internet and maximize their connectivity. Now, our investments, I would put them in two buckets. We have the traditional physical infrastructure investments that we're doing, things like the subsea cable, which is circling the whole of Africa and will land in over 27 countries on the continent. And in Nigeria alone, we have 2 landing points scheduled. We have the physical infrastructure that we're building out, fiber across states as well. We're very proud and we're fortunate that we've been able to do it across 3 states in Nigeria, and we're very much hoping that we can do that. And we've seen what that has done in helping to support local entrepreneurship and local industry across those states. We have our last mile projects, with things like express Wi-Fi, which really look at the smaller scale of businesses being able to access connectivity and get online and communicate as quickly and as cheaply as possible. And then on the other side, and also for infrastructure, we're doing what I consider to be extremely unique things. Like we launched Bombix, which is an aerial fiber deployment, which actually deploys fiber across existing infrastructure like telephone lines. So instead of looking for having to consider the high the high cost of building, digging, laying, there is existing infrastructure already. There are telephone lines and electricity pipelines all across the continent and all across the country. We have a technology that can actually deploy fiber across those lines, and make again, for rural connectivity, a lot easier and a lot simpler and more accessible. And then on the second side, which is really the last mile, getting the businesses and, like you said, traditionally excluded segments of the entrepreneurship and business space, like women-led businesses, small micro-scale businesses, to be able to access the internet and be able to scale up their businesses as well. We have we've all seen what WhatsApp has done, how WhatsApp has helped people expand their businesses, expand their understanding of the ecosystem, reach out to new customers. It has been a lifeline, particularly in during the recent pandemic. We have rolled out things like the cross-platform conversations, so you can click on Instagram and talk to send a message through WhatsApp. You can do the same from Messenger. You can click on the ads in Facebook and reach the person on Instagram. So we're making this interoperability and this cross-platform connectivity a lot easier for businesses, because we recognize that people don't really have time, or are not particularly knowledgeable about how to reach people on different platforms. And sometimes if there's a one-stop shop, I see something on Instagram, I see something on Facebook, I want to communicate with the person, there's a WhatsApp number and I can send the message directly. We have yesterday, 2 days ago, we just rolled out a WhatsApp business tool where anybody can use this tool to get go through a series of e-learning processes, e-learning courses on how to scale up your business online and on WhatsApp. And of course, there's Blueprints, we have, which is an online e-learning center with over 90 different free courses that anybody can access. So we're investing in providing a lot more resources. There's Carlos and the Data for Good team. There's the Blueprints team. There is the interoperability processes going on. So we recognize that, like I said, there's not one bullet. There's not one solution.
There are different aspects that need to be addressed, and then yes.
And different segments. And we're trying very much to make sure that we have resources for each of those segments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adora, for sharing what you're doing. And I think that's a final roundup point in talking about the role of infrastructure. The example we have, for instance, is that there are programs that we do that are free, but there's some states, and particularly during the pandemic, there were states where we did that program, where we did those programs, and you provide data support to them. But if they don't have the infrastructure to even connect, even and use that data and that internet, they would also have the challenge. So please, I really would like to, please, can everybody virtually and in person here really help me to appreciate our panelists for the first session, Dr. Diko Marurada, Tubos Walake, Carlos Ahumada, Yewande Adewusi, and Adora, who joined us. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we'll do a quick transition and then we'll start quickly with the second panel. And I know all our panelists are right here with us. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, for the last panel session. I thought it was inspiring. I don't know about you. A lot of the points that were made really just made me hopeful about the future of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Nigeria, from the conversation on resilience of Nigerian businesses by Carlos, collaborations and linkages that were strongly emphasized by Tubosun Alake, ongoing work by Smeden to support businesses with innovation and technology, and then using existing technology to make internet accessible. Using existing technology to make internet accessible. And then for me, the most exciting is here with us. Excellent. Then we have Tosin Fani-Rodada, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Endeavor, who would also be speaking on this panel. And then we have Yvonne Johnson, who is the co-founder in DCNA, who would also be speaking on this panel. Again, to moderate this panel will be our awesome Executive Director, Adenike Adeyemi. A round of applause as we commence these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amaka, and thank you all, everyone that has stayed with us and is continuing on to the second part and the final panel conversation that we're having today. I would like to welcome again Stefan, Tosin, and Yvonne on the call. This conversation is around this conversation that we're having is around entrepreneurship-led growth. You know, the data was, you know, we all have different data that really point to how entrepreneurs, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and even high growth entrepreneurs are really the backbone of our local, state, and national economies. They create most of the jobs. We've seen over the years that the jobs entrepreneurs are creating, the jobs micro, small, and medium enterprises are creating significantly continue to rise over the years. There's a new Smeden NBS report coming out soon, and I look forward to seeing the role job creation has made. We're also seeing entrepreneurs, even their contribution to the gross domestic product, productivity, the impact they have on an economic level, and also even the impact that they have from a social level. The other day, we did a random poll across an audience that we had, and 70% of young people that were there were employed by an entrepreneur, by a micro, small, and medium entrepreneur, or were working with a startup. You know, only less than 30% were working with a corporate. And so we're seeing them creating jobs, we're seeing them being very influential in innovation, in creating products and services that have socio-economic impact from across all sectors, agribusiness, financial services, education, health. It's really interesting and inspiring to see. Faith Foundation has been around for 21 years, and even for us, the evolution of entrepreneurship over the years is something that is really, like I said, it's inspiring to see the impact across different sectoral levels, demographic levels, state levels also. that we've seen. And so these conversations today will be looking around, now that we're, particularly for Nigeria, where the impact of the pandemic was not as severe health-wise as it was to some other countries, but we saw different strains enhancing the fragilities that we already have as a country. We also really just exited recession, but we're seeing challenging economic growth. We're seeing increasingly high rate of unemployment and underemployment. Our poverty indices are really not looking good. Inflation, a lot of the indices are not looking promises, but we also believe in the power of entrepreneurs across different levels and segments to really lead us out of this growth and recovery. And so this conversation is going to be an intentional conversation on how do we enable, support, facilitate, invigorate, provide deliberate investment of time, resources, financing in that. We're also, again, because the conversation is around inclusion and sustainability, also going to look at also investing in specific aspects of our demographic. So again, young people who make up 60-70% of the population, women who make up half of the population. How do we also ensure that those investments, that support towards achieving the growth that we can see is inclusive and is sustainable? And I think that we do have a very strong panel who will help us in terms of articulating our thoughts and our conversations. So I would like to invite everybody to start with an introductory comment again around what they see around entrepreneurs facilitating entrepreneurship-led growth. And I'm going to start with Stefan, go with Tosin, and then Yvonne. About a 2 to 3 minute introductory comment on your thoughts, what you think, and even talking about what the institutions you work with, and obviously for Yvonne, your business. What do you think it's important to you that you've done in that regard? So please, starting with Stefan. Stefan, you're welcome. Over to you.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having invited me for this. Youth is an asset. That's the first thing I'd like to say. And I know it hasn't been always the case. And it's a growing belief for a lot of our populations.
I can't hear Stefan, so I'm not sure if that is
can you hear me?
Is in the studio or it's
can you
everywhere else.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, please go on, Stefan. Thank you. Sorry,
so I was saying,
again. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Youth, for me, is an asset. And I know it hasn't been always the case, hasn't always been viewed like that. And 70% of our population is under the age of 35 on the continent. So we've really got to be conscious of that value. So when we say it's an asset, it means that over time it's going to give dividends. And so we have to believe in our youth. And this is something that has changed in the last 5 to 10 years, where the governments also are really also looking to invest in our youth. And I caught the end of your prior conversation, and clearly there is a lot of dynamic in Nigeria as well. The entrepreneurship issues are multiple, as we know. There's obviously several different types of angles that we can take it from. But the one that we're looking for here, from our perspective, is that we're trying to build at the African Development Bank, along with partners and with the governments, of course, we're trying to build ecosystems that include the financial and non-financial services around making entrepreneurs survive. And even if they fail, they can start again. It's very important also to be able to believe that one doesn't necessarily have to be successful at the first time around, but one can try again. And this is where you have to believe that you can find the financing again, and you can also find the non-financial support. So this is where the governments have obviously had to realize that their role is very much in the enabling part of this equation. To a certain extent, in some cases, and I'll give examples in another part of my talk, about you also need them also to put some money where their mouth is. We actually do investments to actually trigger the private sector to be comforted, if I may put it that way, in investing in the youth. So I think I'll stop here, but it's really about non-financial and financial systems being put together and obviously working together with the same goal, and we all have the same goal, to make sure that the entrepreneurs do feel supported. And of course, this also starts in school, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. Tosin, over to you.
Thank you, Nika. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me. So for us, I would like to just talk about this concept that we talk about in Endeavor a lot. It's called the big bubble, the multiplier effect. And we truly believe that entrepreneurs transform economies. It's not grant money. It's not government alone. It's not private sector alone. It's this whole ecosystem that is led and driven by entrepreneurs. And when we talk about big bubbles, we talk about successful entrepreneurs who are now giving back. So if you think about Argentina, for instance, or if you even think about Silicon Valley, if you think about the first set of entrepreneurs that went to start companies, apart from just starting companies, they were also training. So the first set of employees that worked for them were trained by them. And then what you then find is that these employees then leave to start their own companies, thereby creating jobs and also training another set of people. And then you find that the first set of successful entrepreneurs then become investors and invest in their former employees' companies. And then you then create this cycle, this big bubble effect, this multiplier effect. And that's truly how you transform economies. And if I tie this back to what we're doing in Endeavor, we're trying to ensure that the high impact, high growth companies in Nigeria are successful, because when they're successful, they can then give back and pay it forward and invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs. When they're successful, we don't have to rely too much on capital from the global market. Our local investors will be able to invest back. And we're already seeing this. If you look at some of the high growth, high impact entrepreneurs in Nigeria, GB, for instance, he's investing in other fintech businesses. That is success. If you look at InterSwitch, for instance, InterSwitch has been a training ground for so many employees. TMAP, the founders of TMAP were trained in InterSwitch. They worked in InterSwitch, and now they've gone to start their own company that would obviously, hopefully become $1 billion company in the future. So that's the idea, that we can transform our economies and our entrepreneurs will transform our economies for us.
Thank you, Tosin. Yvonne?
Thank you so much for having me. Hope you can hear me properly. Just in terms of kind of, opening remarks, when we think about the topic of, entrepreneurship-led growth, I think there's kind of specifically kind of 3 points I wanted to raise, and hopefully we can kind of dig deeper into it as we go into the panel. I think one, when we think about kind of, designing policy and kind of catalyzing this growth, I think there's one thing around, when we define kind of, the form of entrepreneurship. I run a technology startup, so I definitely have a bias, but I think that, we really should design for kind of entrepreneurship that leads to high growth outcomes, right? Specifically, we're talking about, we're aiming for kind of high volume, high quality jobs created at a very rapid pace, right? So that's one thing that, that's just really one talking point, just to really say that, if we really kind of say, how are we defining this entrepreneurship? What are we really aiming for? I think if we're aiming for scale, high growth, high quality at a fast pace, you then start to get those benefits around, economic growth, which we're trying to solve for. I think the second thing as well that, we should also dig into is also influencing high potential founding teams. And Tosin just alluded to that, because if you take the first point and believe that, okay, it's the right thing to do, to solve for kind of, high growth outcomes with entrepreneurship, then, the chances of getting there, are easier if you have kind of high potential founding teams, right? And so my theory is that, deeper domain knowledge, deeper corporate experience will lead to this high growth outcomes, right? So I think that's one point. The last point, of course, is, what I like to say, kind of non-predatory policy, and just getting very practical. running a startup, the average business, small and large, you face kind of multiple levies, multiple taxes from multiple agencies, right? And so just the practical aspect of, look, how do you just streamline all of that so that, this person that's running kind of, this, small business or startup, is not just getting, bombarded from, so many different people, right? So those are kind of 3 points that I think, when we think about this topic and discussing it, I think it's, it's really good to kind of double click on all these things.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you. Thank you to the three of you for your opening remarks. Stefan talked about how do you trigger the investments to harness and facilitate the demographic dividend. Tosin and Yvonne talked about that multiplier effect, right? That if you're thinking of the growth, particularly high growth, and you're thinking of jobs, economic impact, you also have to invest, support, in fact, design for the aspects of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that will create the kind of growth that you need. And we'll delve into that. You also talked about policies too. So we'll delve into that in a bit more detail. So Stefan, you're the money man on this panel. You're the money person here. And a lot of times when you talk about the issues and the challenges, the first thing and the most obvious thing, a lot of people talk about would be access to finance. And when I look even from Faith Foundation's database up to when we were founded, the funding in the space now, in fact, the funding, and when I talk about funding, is different aspects, grant, equity investments, all of that. In the last 2 years has been more than in the last 20 years combined. Has been more than in our first 20 years that we've seen at Faith. So, and the other thing also is that in our State of Entrepreneurship report, across all the segments, access to finance still remains a challenge and still remains the challenge. And I think it would always be there. So what do you think is the major challenge and opportunity with financing? I know you talked about financing and non-financing support. So I want us to start with financing first. What do you think are the challenges and the opportunities with facilitating financing to accelerate the growth potential?
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. Well, listen, on the financing side, the challenges are very simple. As I said, youth is an asset, but youth doesn't hold assets. And so the problem is they can't show collateral. So they go to their usual banker and the banker looks at them and says, well, thank you very much. What is your father putting or what is your mother putting to support you? So the question then becomes, how can we have this first loss to actually make it possible for not necessarily bankers, but anyway, funding facilities for youth to be created that will actually be able to allow for a certain level of failure. And this is why I think it's always a combination of grant money and other types. So the funding facilities, and this is where there's been a real shift, and that's why I think you're saying that there's more money available today. There's been a real shift in the thinking, be it both from the public side, which will actually trigger the private side alongside the foundations, alongside people like Endeavor that Tosin is speaking to be able to actually put more money and more energy into supporting the startups. Let's face it, you have incubators and accelerators. When we invest in a lot of these incubators and accelerators, to be sincere, there's more acceleration than incubation. But it's not necessarily what we should be doing. We should be trying to actually support more incubation than acceleration. Because of course, acceleration means that you already have a certain level of competency. You're trying to basically expand something that is already working well and you're just looking for additional financing. But it obviously there's a learning curve that we're all going through, and that the governments are going through as well, and that there's really a room for this funding support to be created. So what is the main funding that is needed in these cases? It is this first loss possibility. Some countries, I'll give you the example of Morocco. Moroccan government actually has what they call the CDG, la Caisse de dépôt et de gestion, that has provided because they've set up basically several innovation funds, which have different, fintech, agtech, health tech type objectives. And they've allowed, the CDG is providing 40% loss, first loss. So it has allowed and it's run by private sector fund managers. So the government has actually done a selection of private sector fund managers to use some of the government's money dedicated to the youth to actually be invested through private sector managers to support youth in different regions. Of course, it's very much linked to the regions as well, not only in Rabat and Casablanca. But the idea is really to send the message across the country that basically the government is also looking to support the incubators. Now, the incubators themselves, we've been working on that in the bank and discussed it with a lot of our colleagues who are more closer to that than I am, because I'm more on the investing side. You know, I've always asked, how many incubators are run by private sector owners? It's not the majority. And this is also, we're still in the infancy of this space. So I think it's also where, I always come back to the same thing that I mentioned, youth is an asset. We've got to make sure that we run these businesses sustainably over time, but for the moment, it still does need some certain level of handholding. So it's a mix of public sector money and private sector money. One other example I could give you is Rwanda. Rwanda has also done the same, as very similar to Morocco, and it's working very well. They've also set up all these incubators locally. The government is funding the incubators, and it's working well. But of course, you've got to get the private sector to support at some point and take over, in fact. And this is where I think Tosin has a very good point in the fact that the private sector will take it over if they feel they're very much backed, and there's not going to be sudden changes in legislation and policy that will actually impede them from continuing to grow and allowing people to grow through working with the private sector. So fundamentally, in Nigeria, actually, we are working with the government on a new program, which is actually quite ambitious, and is around, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to look through my notes here, to be honest with you. We have, hold on, here it is. Yes, we actually got a $600 million program that we're working on, targeting creative business and technology enabling MSMEs and startups. And we're actually working on it through 4 angles. One angle is the patient equity capital that I mentioned. So there will be a first loss fund that will be created. Of course, and it links up with your conversation earlier on about infrastructure, there will be a lot of work to support the development of quality infrastructure in Nigeria, in particular on the internet connectivity and power issues, to support business innovation and the training of the youth and university students to start businesses. Third level will be, of course, increased youth training in digital and creative entrepreneurship, and I know that's been discussed earlier on. And finally, again, linking up with the environment, review of the policies that promote startup entrepreneurs and supporting venture capital and angel investors, of course. So anyway, so we at the bank have several programs that are doing that as well. But I mean, for us, what is important is to make sure that what we do it mainly through the private sector to be sincere, but we're more and more working with the governments, where we actually also do put money in some of these funds at national level to support the government in this quest to make sure that the youth realize that the government is also there for them and is supporting them in this work. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Stefan. So the first loss approach, de-risking that startup phase. When we were doing the briefing for this conversation, I remember that you had a comment around the number of incubators, not even scratching the surface. And then when you even look at the type of incubators that are even available, there needs to be more thought around the design structure and the ability of the incubators to incubate with that. And we'll come back to that. Tosin, we've always had this conversation around the role of high growth businesses. And sometimes when you're looking at a country as large as Nigeria with large population, large entrepreneurship population, and sometimes when government also plays a strong role in investing and supporting, a lot of that goes to particular segments of the population. What is your perspective around where, I know your answer, but I have to ask, around where these investments should be channeled to in a strategic point of view, right? Because you talked about the multiplier effect. So can you break that down in a bit more detail? Where should we be channeling investments to? And why? Why is that important if we're talking about entrepreneurship-led growth? Thanks, Susan.
Thanks. Thanks, Nick. I'm so sorry. It's like 6 o'clock here.
Yes, thank you for waking up early to join our call. I appreciate.
It's fine. I think that's a fantastic question. And I really loved Stefan's answer to his question, because my answer would tie with his answer as well. In terms of like where I think the gap is, I absolutely agree with Stefan that we need more incubators. In fact, I didn't even think we have that many accelerators. I think what we have are co-working spaces. And these co-working spaces then, claim to be accelerators, but then they're not. And having spent some time with co-working spaces, you then realize that the co-working space business is not very profitable. And that's why if you go to a lot of co-working spaces, you'd see so many private offices, because that's what brings them money. And so I really liked his point about government supporting incubators, because at the end of the day, they probably wouldn't make money, their first few years, because the businesses need to be successful. So what they would do is probably take a stake in the business and hope that in the next, 5 years or 6 years, the business will be successful, and then it would then start to pay off. Same thing with accelerators as well. So I think it's a fantastic idea for the government to partner with private sector to start to fund incubators, because that's what will drive ideas. That's what will encourage ideas, and even also maybe even some sort of, I don't know, and I think he mentioned Rwanda or some other country that funds their losses, gives them some sort of stipend, but just pretty much just encourage young people that this is a path, and we will take care of you to a certain extent until your business is successful. In terms of the different stages of business and where I think the gap is. So when I think about MSMEs, I think, financing is still a huge challenge. I think financing, because a lot of them are not even digitized, there's a huge informal sector. They don't even know where to start from. They don't keep records. They just need help. And they make up a good portion of our economy. And so as much as we talk about startups and scale-ups, we cannot forget the informal sector, and we cannot forget the micro businesses, because at the end of the day, until these startups and scale-ups scale, the micro businesses, the mom and pop shops are the ones providing the jobs today. One micro business would provide at least one job. One SME business would provide 2 to 3 jobs. Those are people that might be unemployed if the businesses were not there. So for MSMEs, I think access to finance. But when we then move to startups, I think access to markets is so important. I think government needs to come up with some sort of set aside. And I keep saying this all the time, like we have in the States, whereby government and large corporates are encouraged to test and adopt products. If they have funding to develop their solutions or their products, if nobody will offtake it from them, then they can't be successful. They can't scale. They can't test. They can't learn from the product. They can't iterate. There's so many things that they can't do. So I think for startups, access to market is important, as well as funding. But we're beginning to see a lot of activity in the funding space. We're beginning to see a lot of angel investing. Like I said, a lot of successful entrepreneurs now investing in startups, and also a lot of there's more interest because of the success from Paystack and Flutterwave. Everybody wants to make 10x now. Individuals, institutions, everybody wants to make 10x, and so you're getting more activity. But I think access to market is really important for startups, and then for the scale-ups, as they get to Series C and Series D, it's capital, it's access to other markets, it's access to mentors and to leaders. They're going from managing a business of 10 to 50 people to a business of 200 people, 300 people, 500 people. They've never done this before. And so it's important for them to connect with people in other markets that have gone through the challenges that they're going through, and also business leaders in their local ecosystem that have also gone through this before, dealing with regulators, dealing with partners and the likes. But I also think that in terms of the funding for scale-ups, because of the amount of capital that they need, I'm not sure if that capital resides in Nigeria, if I'm being honest. And so I would stop here. I know I've been talking for too long. Sorry.
No, you've
I'll
not.
stop here.
Yes. You've not. You've actually
Okay.
helped me also build the question that I'm going to ask Yvonne. And because you've helped us move from financing, but also non-financing issues. Now, if you ask me, from my experience, what I've even realized is that when when entrepreneurs across say that they need issues around money or they need capital.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Stefan, but I can't hear Nick here anymore.
Yeah, I think we've lost her.
Just frozen, yeah.
Okay. Hopefully it'll come back. So where are you?
I'm
In
in
the
New
States?
York.
Oh my God.
I know, and I've been up since 3 o'clock.
Is Nika still frozen or is it just me?
She's still frozen. Okay, now she's gone.
No, she's gone.
Yeah. Yvonne, you're there as well, right? So it's all of us. It's all of us who are here.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
we've lost we've lost the host. It's quite interesting. Usually it's the opposite, huh?
Maybe we just take over the show.
Hello. Hi, Tosin. Sorry, what?
The technical glitch. So what I was responding to Tosin's comments around how her feedback was a good input to my next question. Okay. And that's because when you ask a lot of entrepreneurs around the issues they have around financing, and you ask, a lot of those things have to do with how do I access markets? How do I build structure? And some of that will even be addressed even in terms of mentoring, because there are decisions they want to make. They're going to get money and then use them for things that will not even grow or support their businesses. And so, Yvonne, my question to you then will be around, we've talked about the role of incubators in helping to build, grow, and scale businesses, whether for startups, whether for growing businesses. What do you think that incubators, so that we don't have incubators that are co-working spaces, what do you think that is important for incubators to think about in the design, the structure of their incubation programs that will be important, will be useful, relevant for someone like you or even upcoming startups or businesses that are looking to build their businesses? Because we're now talking about how do you enable the technical and infrastructural support, and incubators are a very large component of facilitating that.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And I think I mean, just like Tosin said, you have the kind of, the first kind of wave of incubators, and, after a while, maybe they start to look at co-working spaces, right? But I think it's kind of as they mature, they then start to kind of, make that impact, right? And again, if you think about, when I think about an incubator, it's almost kind of like, a safe space, for, an entrepreneur to, really kind of test out his ideas. And essentially you're just kind of, catalyzing the growth for that entrepreneur, right? And just, kind of giving them kind of all the support they need within kind of a quote unquote safe environment, right? And, working space is one of it. I mean, that's, everybody kind of needs, some sort of a physical space to work, right? I mean, even with, with everything happening virtually. I think with the incubators, it's always kind of, just kind of going, beyond that, right? And saying that, because it's really everything, right? If you think about everything that, an entrepreneur needs to succeed, right? It's having all of those things, right? And they're all coming kind of at the same time, right? So you talk about access to financing, right? And I know some kind of incubators type accelerators, there's usually kind of, a fund that they have as part of it, and, they're able to kind of, offer some sort of funding, to participants in the incubators, right? You talk about kind of access to markets, you talk about, I think even kind of capacity building, right? Which is one thing that, I don't see, a lot happening with, right? Because again, back to kind of my opening remarks about, just, you have this kind of, high potential team, right? And you're kind of solving for that, that's kind of, just kind of the first stage, right? And making sure that, okay, this is somebody that, has the domain knowledge, has the capacity, to be able to kind of, start a business and kind of scale it up, right? And I feel like, if you don't kind of get that right in terms of kind of the selection process, right, it then makes it kind of, much tougher. Down the line, right? So I feel like, with the incubators, right? I mean, it starts, it's kind of like the value chain, right? So from the selection aspect and making sure that, you're really kind of, selecting the folks that, have kind of the high potential to succeed. And then even just kind of thinking broadly about, during the incubation program, what are you providing them? You're just being very practical about, all the support that they need, whether it's funding, whether it's, market access to markets, whether it's just even capacity building, whether it's even helping them kind of think through, the different ideas and the business plans and whatnot, right? So that would kind of be, my response to that, is just to say that, there's a lot that has to happen, right? At the same time, for these businesses really just to kind of, get on that kind of rocket ship, right? And if you have the incubator level, right, starting with the selection, you just need to make sure that, you're putting all of that program in place, during the incubation program.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thanks. So Stefan, back to you again. One of the things also around growth is that you must be able to see the progress that you're making. And we've had, so you've mentioned a few programs that the bank is doing and investing in direct and indirect support to facilitating things around internet infrastructure and supporting sectors like the creative business economy and the like. How do we measure the growth that we're trying to see? One of the questions that we had in the first panel, which I felt was relevant to this panel, was that a lot of entrepreneurs look and feel that, every time we look back, there's so many funding programs that have been announced, $600 billion fund, 500 million naira fund, all of that, but they don't see anything. They don't see any progress, they don't see any indicators and all of that. What do you think should change in our approach to defining indicators and measuring the kind of success that we want to see in facilitating growth?
That is the $1 billion question, or billion naira question, if you like. It's the never-ending discussion between ourselves and some of these providers of first loss money as well. How do we measure success of these programs? Now, of course, it depends on obviously the objective of the program, but clearly, when you're talking about entrepreneurship-led programs to support startups and incubators, you'll obviously have a set of indicators that vary between a startup one and an incubator one and an accelerator one. But fundamentally, it's about job creation. It's about sustaining the jobs. So it's actually indicators that are used over several years. It's not about one-off. It takes several years, and this is the difficulty, in fact, because you're constantly in this process of trying to raise money to support, because there's always this grant element that you're trying to maintain, and the people that are providing the grant money, as all taxpayers all over the world, want to know why their money's, what is it being used for, and how relevant it is, and so they legitimately are very demanding on that. So it's about, because capacity building, you can capacitate thousands and thousands of people, but does that mean that they actually implement what they've been capacitated with? Do they use it in an effective manner? You don't know. So the point is, the capacity building part is very important. Training is very important, of course, but you've got to go beyond those numbers. You've got to say, we've trained so many, and this has led to so many businesses actually being launched. And this is how many jobs have been created as a follow-up to these businesses being launched, because you can't expect the jobs to be created immediately when businesses are launched. It takes time. So this is the point. You've also got, this is the thing also, I'd say the indicators, there are several, and they're at different stages. Tosin mentioned that, you know, you've got series A, B, C, D, etc. You've got different types of needs of entrepreneurs at different stages of development. Well, you should have indicators that are more or less, let's say, harmonized with those different needs at those different points. But fundamentally, job creation, training, but beyond training, people trained, capacity building and training. It's about not only jobs created, but in companies registered. How many companies have been registered? And Tosin mentioned the informal economy. In fact, that is the biggest obstacle we all have, because we're all groping in the dark. We're looking, because informal economy, that's the whole point of it. We don't know. And the value of the digital, COVID, one thing that COVID has done that is relevant to us all, it's actually formalizing the informal implicitly through digitization. So we have to leverage that option, that possibility, that opportunity that's been created for us to actually help people in the informal to be formalized. And I remember when we were in preparing this, I asked you about where do the people that you work with at Fate, where do the youth come from? Because that's one of my big questions to all of the incubator people who run incubators. Where do you find the potential business unicorns that come to your shop? Because if it's only from universities, I believe it shouldn't only be from universities. Of course, universities should be part of it, but it should be people dropouts as well. They're as intelligent as anyone else. They have a different intelligence, maybe. So the point is, we have to also help these people leverage these opportunities that we create. I know I'm slightly deviating from the response, but clearly, and there's indicators. We have to really have indicators that are adapted. And it's a very difficult discussion sometimes with the donors, I'll be sincere. It's not an easy discussion because they want results quickly. And this is not a quick results area. I hope in the next 10 to 15 years, it will become more of a quick results area, but it isn't the case today. Thank you.
Thank you. And honestly, what I think is important from there is the long-term view of it, but also defining the journey there. So have a 7-year view, but by year 1, what do we want to see? Year 3, year 4, but also being clear about that even from the beginning, so that when you put together funding programs, financing, people know the impact and the outcome, and they can follow that journey, bearing in mind that things may change, and there may be an opportunity to review and to reassess that. Tosin, women-led businesses and women-led high-growth businesses are significantly at a disadvantage point. One of the things that we loved in this, one of the findings that we saw in our State of Entrepreneurship report was an improved participation of women-led businesses across different segments. And it's really something that we're very excited about. Women make up half of the population. If we look at the SMIDAN data, which you are very familiar with, micro businesses, small and medium enterprise businesses have only 22% as women-led businesses. So you find a lot of women businesses playing at the very micro level, and then at the SME level, just less than a quarter. And if we're looking at high growth businesses, I'm sure that it's even like half or less than half of that. So from your perspective and where you see, where is the missing gap? People are talking, I can't even tell you the number of panels, programs that I've seen about gender lens investing. What are we missing? Or is it like Stefan said, the investments have started, so we will see that result in about 6 to 7 years. What do you think is missing? What do you think is happening? What do you think needs to change in terms of enabling women-led businesses, particularly in that high growth potential phase?
Thanks. Thank you, Nika. So if I think about, I mean, you said 22% SMEs are owned by women. That number drops lower for startups and much lower for scale-ups. I think women have been left out. I think women have been left out, and I think what we need is capital for women, because the truth is, if you don't have access to the same capital that men have, it's almost impossible for you to compete. And so if you look at the data, for instance, if you look at the fundraising or the capital raising data, you find that a very small percentage of the funding coming into Africa, into Nigeria, is going to women-led businesses, or at least a business that's owned by, that 50% of the business is owned by a woman. And so right now, I'm really happy that I've been intentional about supporting early stage women businesses. When you support early stage businesses with capital, it also comes with capacity, mentorship, and access as well. And so they have access to these three different buckets that can help them scale their business or take their business to the next level. Capital, for me, I see a huge gap with startups, and if they can't start, they can't even get to scale up. So I can't even say scale up because they never even got to startups. And so, like, you know, we have very few Yvonne Johnsons here. We should have more. We need more. You know, we have more success stories that come from men that we hear about, because we just get more support. And so I think we just need to be intentional. And I'm seeing it now. I've seen there are a few funds out there just for women, or at least businesses that are 50% owned by women. And they're being intentional about supporting women and giving them the access that they need.
Thank you very much. So Yvonne, we want more of Yvonne Johnsons in this space. And so Tosin has talked about the intentionality around how do you design the funds and the financing from the early stage so that they can grow. What other forms of support do you think are very critical for women-led high-growth businesses?
Thank you. That's you know, again, it's a
and
very.
One more thing, you had referenced
Sure.
policy in your initial opening comments. I want you to speak about that a bit in terms of enabling this, the question that we're addressing.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a good one. I mean, and let me take the policy one first. And again, just in terms of background, you know, what we do at Indicina is, you talked about it kind of in your opening remarks when you were launching, you know, that really awesome report. And, you know, access to financing is a key pillar, right, for small businesses, right? You know, this is both kind of equity financing, this is both debt financing. And within Indicina, what we do is that, you know, really believe in the power of, you know, technology, and also helping lenders. So what we do is that we work with lenders to help them channel debt funding primarily to both consumers and SMEs, right? You know, however you slice it, you know, the credit gap on the continent is unreasonably high, right? You know, I mean, this is kind of like a fundamental structural challenge that, you know, is at the heart of everything that we're talking about. And so what we do is that we work with these lenders and help them understand kind of the power of technology and really help them to de-risk these customer segments. Because if you ask them, they would say it's risky. Oh, these are people in the informal sector. How would I, you know where to look for them if I give them funding? But what you find is that, you know, I mean, these are actually, you know, quite frankly, even just kind of profitable, you know, opportunities. I mean, I noticed we did a lot of work with LSETF. I mean, they're kind of a prime, you know, shining example of what can happen if you really kind of put your mind to it. And so when we talk about, you know, kind of policy, right, you know, one of the things that I think about in terms of challenges, you know, there's something around kind of client education, right, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, the way kind of, you know, especially if you talk about kind of debt financing, right, you know, you can't get away from kind of the lenders and the banks, right? You know, they have kind of, you know, the deepest pockets of, you know, of capital in terms of the balance sheet, right? You know, and so there is a lot that, you know, needs to happen around just, you know, one kind of policy that really incentivizes them to channel more of this funding to where it's required. What we find with our work as well is that there's a lot of kind of client education that needs to happen, right? You know, just, you know, quite frankly, just being able to convince these lenders that, you know, these are kind of bankable opportunities, right? You know, and, you know, in general, for them, even for some of these lenders, you know, there is a piece around technology adoption, right? And that also requires a kind of education. You know, the other thing too is that, you know, again, goes without saying, our market has kind of low economic inclusion, right? You know, and so it means that for a lot of people, you know, they are even shut out, right? You know, even for lenders with, the best intentions, right? So again, and I know there's already a lot of policy around kind of, driving that inclusion and whatnot, right? So I think, just continuing to do that.
Thank you.
I hope that answers the question. I know there was a first part to the question.
Yes, it does. You started with the policy and then talked about the different support structure from the financial institutions and all the other programming design that is important. Thank you very much to our second panel. We really appreciate your input and contributions. And thank you so much. I'm aware that we're out of time. I don't know if there's any final closing statements that you'd really like to give in less than 30 seconds to just round up this conversation. Thank you. Stefan, I'll start with you.
I'd like to congratulate you on your work at Fate Foundation. I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of you before. You invited me, and I'm very pleased to have been invited. And I wish you all the best, and I very look forward to having the FDB working with you more closely in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting our invitation and contributing to our conversations. We look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Tosin.
Thank you, Nika. I was actually enjoying the conversation. I can't believe it's over already. I looked at the time and it's 7 o'clock here. I just want to say thank you to you, Fatai, Amaka, Faith Foundation. These conversations are super important. And well done to you on NESG, on the report, and happy to support you. Let me know how I can support you. I'm always here.
Thank you, Tosin. From LSCTF, you also had a back. So right on to Endeavor. And thank you for waking up very early to join our conversations. Thank you so much. Yvonne?
Thank you again for having me. Really enjoyed it. I mean, I think in terms of closing remarks, I started reading the report, and I would certainly encourage everybody to do it because the report touches on the right things, right? I mean, being on kind of my side of the table, a lot of it resonated with me. And I feel like, if we really kind of take the report, synthesize it, whatever type of kind of, policy initiatives come out of it, we would start to see that mileage. I mean, I would like to see more people that look like me on this side of the divide, right? I'm a strong believer in kind of entrepreneurship and even just the power of technology, right? So I think in terms of a closing remark, it's really, please read the report. So there's a lot of good things in there.
Thank you very much. So you heard it from Yvonne. Please read the report. We don't just want you to circulate the report, really. And we will be engaging with everyone else here again. Thank you so much, Stefan, Tosin, and Yvonne. It was great having you. Thank you so much. Over to you, Amaka. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for our panel speakers and for our able moderator who moderated 2 panels back to back. Our executive director, Adenike Adeyemi. A round of applause again for the last panel session. Thank you so much to all our speakers. I think that we've had a lot of conversations, we've had a lot of pointers around key information that touch on enabling post-pandemic recovery for entrepreneurs, on fostering innovation through technology, on entrepreneurship-led growth. So much has been shared, a lot of insights, a lot of recommendations. But to sort of pull all of that together and tie it, to the theme, which is building an inclusive, cohesive, and sustainable ecosystem, I'm going to invite our board director, who is also a partner at Banwo and Igodalo, Mrs. Sheyi Bella, to give the recap and closing remarks. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for such an interactive session. On behalf of Fate Foundation, I think I would like to appreciate our special guests and our panelists for their time with us today. Of course, a special thanks go to our guest speaker, Matt Smith, as well as all the panelists in the first session and also at the second session as well. The conversations today have been so rich and robust. We've been talking about building an inclusive, cohesive, and sustainable ecosystem. And if I start to talk about the different things that have been said today, it's just been amazing, just a huge wealth of knowledge that has been provided today. And if I start with the first panel session, the panelists highlighted the role of technology in business survival, business growth, accessing funding and new markets. And of course, that panel session spoke to fostering innovation through technology. And we had different people. We had Dr. Diko Umar Rada, who provided a lot of information about Sweden. And I could see that a lot of people were asking questions. Many people didn't know that Sweden was actually doing a lot of activities. And so thank you so much for the wealth of knowledge that you provided. Specifically, we have understood today that micro businesses, which are informal, are not able to leverage on information, on technology, and as a result of that, they find themselves in a very disadvantaged position. Specifically, there is lack of financial empowerment, and that has also affected their ability to even invest. They're unable to access technology, and if they are able to access technology, if they are able to find some sort of digital literacy, then that will itself improve entrepreneurship and also economic growth. We've also heard from him on all the different things that Sweden is actually doing. And so it was very interesting to learn about the Sweden Digital Academy, the Market Hub, the digital skills for women and youth, and even the Enterprise Hub, where you can have access to information, data, and power. And he said 24 hours electricity. So please, 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 I would encourage entrepreneurs who are listening to please go to the Sweden website and see how you can engage a bit more and use the benefits that are being provided. We also had Mr. Tubosun Alake, who provided, a state-level perspective on innovation as a strategy to building resilience using the Lagos State entrepreneurship ecosystem as a case study. It was really interesting to learn about the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council. I'm not sure many people knew that existed. So thank you, Faith Foundation, for hosting this wonderful session where we have learned a lot today. So yes, we've seen that Lagos State is doing something with respect to policy intervention, with grants, with funding, and partnerships. I really liked the message with respect to collaboration. And I think when we think of all that Tubosun said to us today, we will remember collaboration, we will remember linkage, if you don't remember anything else. And so when we talk about collaboration, he spoke to different multidisciplinaries, coming together to ensure that they strengthen the ecosystem. I really liked the interlinkage between universities and industries. And it's important that we start to think about how our education can even be refined in such a way that it is real, it is consistent, it's dealing with what is actually happening in our industries today. So thank you very much for all that you're doing in that area. You also talked a bit about incubation centers. And again, going back to speak to collaboration and, reiterating the fact that there's a lot of siloed activities. And so we must work together to collaborate. So who should collaborate? Collaboration on different levels. Collaboration, venture capital, funders. Of course, government has primary responsibility in driving entrepreneurial growth. And government has to set the tone. Government has to encourage, even people who are coming out from the educational sector. Of course, not-for-profits like Faith Foundation, who are already doing a great job, must continue in the stead with respect to entrepreneurship, development, and growth in Nigeria. And he talked about legislators. We cannot, not have them involved in the conversation. And so there must be smart regulations, regulations that work, regulations that are current, regulations that deal with the needs of people. Private sector must start to participate in corporate lobbying. Don't sit down there and wait for policies to go the wrong way and then scream. Participate in policy development, even as it goes through. And so that's the message from even the state. And of course, we had Carlos Ahumada from Meta. I mean, he provided a perspective from a data-driven organization. And he told us, gave us different facts and different statistics about how Nigeria is doing in the global market, comparing, businesses generating revenue, businesses who haven't done so well, and how when we look at ourselves today in Nigeria, we should pat ourselves a bit on the back because we may just be doing a little bit better than we think. Notwithstanding, he still mentioned that there are a lot of opportunities, to expand online sales, and policymakers need to help facilitate a healthy economic development. It was interesting to hear that women-led businesses between July and August actually leaped by 10% from 63% to 73% in the middle of a challenging situation. And so this reflects the resilience of women-led SMEs, to continue in the stride to build up companies. Carlos also talked to us about other additional enablers to sustain a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so he spoke to, of course, increasing network infrastructure. And I'm sure that continues to be the bane of things that many entrepreneurs complain about. Many entrepreneurs want better internet connectivity. Many entrepreneurs want better power. Many entrepreneurs want better infrastructure. And so when we talk about improving financial inclusion and also the support and the talent for startups and young entrepreneurs, I like the conversation around promoting clusters and also peer-to-peer information transmission schemes. That is something that is, that we welcome, and that is something that we think that the government and all the private sectors should also jump up on. Of course, academic research. Academic research continues to be very important. And of course, borrowing up from what Tubason said, there must be that linkage between the academic sector and industries so that our education is real. I liked what he said about starting early, educate the younger generation in such a way that they can start to appreciate technology and have an entrepreneurial mindset. That is the way forward. Thank you so much. Yewande was fab. Everybody who remembers Yewande today will say storytelling, emotional connection. And storytelling was amazing to hear storytelling from different perspectives. Storytelling from an entrepreneur's perspective, storytelling also from other stakeholders within the ecosystem. And from an entrepreneur's perspective, it was nice to hear that, look, don't be too worried about the fact that you're not Nike who can afford to pay so much for a commercial advertisement. But you can start small, use the images that you have, work with small influencers, who actually do have a niche, and identify those influencers who can actually help you to strengthen your business. Also, definitely leverage social media. Work on your website, use email marketing, and use data. And when the conversation started to go on with respect to other ecosystem builders, we started to talk a lot about the need to help find hidden gems. I really like the story I really like the point about finding hidden gems, because in our ecosystem, there are many other companies, who need to tell their stories and who need to tell credible stories, that then also help to build accountability. We thought we had, seen everything. And then of course we had panel 2 come talk to us about entrepreneurship. Thank you so much to Stefan. Thank you so much to Yvonne. And thank you so much to Tosin. Stefan had mentioned youths are an asset. And if for any reason you doubted in your ability or your capacity, remember that you are an asset. But that's not that cannot work in itself alone. Everybody has to cooperate to ensure that things work. Government has to invest in the youth. And investment in the youth is not just to give direct funding, it's also to understand that, look, there will be scenarios where there will be failure, and to embrace failure as a part of growth as well. If you are able to provide funding for first loss, if you are able as government to take the first plunge, then maybe that encourages other private sectors to participate and to also partner in the intention or the objective, basically, of entrepreneurial growth. So government must provide infrastructure, government must encourage incubators, and of course, Tosin talked to us about the multiplier effect, the big bubble concept. Entrepreneurs transform economies. Successful entrepreneurs will come back to the society, they will become investors, they will train, and people who have received training will then also train others. And of course, when entrepreneurs think about access to funding, they should also think about access to other things that may not be funding, but are also very important for entrepreneurial development. And what are these? Access to market, access to mentoring, capacity development, building capacity, training. These things, even though non-financial, are also important in strengthening an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Thank you, Yvonne, for the perspective that you provided. From being founder of a corporate organization, dedicated to building infrastructure. And so Yvonne talked to us about the form of entrepreneurship. And she explained that, even when we want to think about building entrepreneurs, we have to think about, we should aim for those entrepreneurs that have high impact. And of course, we cannot forget non-predatory policies that basically impact the abilities of businesses to grow. I hope that in listening to all the conversations today, we won't just be hearers, but we will think about these things and where we need to actually change policy, where we actually need to influence policy, where we actually need to come back to the table, the drawing table, and decide on how we want to impact society to improve entrepreneurial growth, that we will. So thank you, everybody. I truly want to appreciate you, and to our online, viewers who have participated, who've been with us for such a long time. Thank you so, so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for that detailed recap and for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sticking with us from 10 a.m. till now. Thank you so much. Well, we have literally come to the end of the program, but a few pointers before we leave. Please download and share the State of Entrepreneurship reports that has been launched today. The download link will be dropped to the chat box. It is www.faithfoundation.org/2021 SOE. Please also visit our research portal on the Faith Foundation website, www.faithfoundation.org/research, to download all our other research reports. Join our policy advocacy work at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Please send us an email to policy@faithfoundation.org if you're interested in joining our advocacy work. For feedback on our research, and particularly our research report that we just launched, please send your emails to research@faithfoundation.org. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the program. On behalf of the Board of Directors and management at Faith Foundation, would like to thank our partners, Meta. Would also like to thank Banwo and Igodalo again. Would like to thank each and every one of you logging in from within and outside of Nigeria. You have made and contributed to making this program a success. Thank you very much. Thank you again to the Faith Institute team, Mr. Godwin Henry, Mr. Oyebola Agunloye. Thank you very much to the entire Faith Foundation team for all of the hard work that went into making this program possible. And thanks, major thanks to our incredible Executive Director, Adenike Adeyemi, our visionary leader, for all of the work that she does in leading the foundation to push frontiers. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your time. My name is Amaka Wokolo. I've been your host today. From all of us at Faith Foundation, Adenike and myself, bye for now. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.